Chapter 412. The purplish-black bamboo shook off the dirt on its body in the air, then flew back to Ziyi's hand. The old man in embroidered robes bellowed, "Slut." Ziyi scoffed. Without needing anyone to call her, she directly landed in front of him, holding the bamboo in her hand, her face cold as she slowly approached. "It seems like she hasn't had enough yet." Yu Qianqiu silently felt bad. This little girl is a one-track mind. She only worships old man Bai's ruthlessness, so she doesn't care about the lives of Bai Hua Fairy and her daughter. So he hurriedly told 100 Charms Enchantress, "Send your voice to her, tell her not to act rashly, be careful that they don't hurt the mother and daughter." 100 Charms Beauty understood the severity of the situation and quickly sent her voice. Ziyi glanced over, then stayed in front of the old man without moving. Seeing his junior brother die, the old man originally wanted to leave the mother and daughter behind to take revenge, but seeing Ziyi coming over, he immediately remembered that he's no match for her, so he held the mother and daughter tightly in his hands and spoke in a low voice. "If you dare act recklessly, I'll make the mother and daughter die in front of you first." Ziyi didn't say anything, only stood there and stared at him, giving him a lot of pressure. The black-clothed people landed from all directions, surrounding the entire battlefield. Each of them had a murderous look on their faces, ready to attack as soon as the order is given. The old man and Yan Bugui looked around, both shocked. These people definitely aren't their people. It's Yu Qianqiu's rogue cultivators. The Cultivation Alliance's side cheered. They confirmed their identities from the rogue cultivator on their chests. Aren't they the rogue cultivators that Yu Qianqiu brought here? But then they noticed something was wrong. Their aura is completely different from the previous rogue cultivators. Originally, they didn't stand in a proper manner, and even if they were to stand together, they wouldn't be able to form a team. However, as these people stood there casually, a sharp aura that was ready to be unleashed was obvious. Especially the eyes that were exposed under their masks were filled with killing intent, and each of them were like wolves waiting for an opportunity to hunt. The allure temptress looked at these people in surprise. Although she could see the words rogue cultivators on their chests, she thought more about it. The heroes who robbed them were all masked and dressed in black. Could it be them? He subconsciously glanced at Yu Qianqiu, only to see him walking out from behind a few trees with a calm face, with his hands behind his back. Standing on the hillside, his eyes scanned the surrounding black-clothed men, and an arrogant look appeared on his face. All of them were at the early stage of the crossing calamity. There were more than 600 of them. Where did he get all this from? The Enchantress of 100 Charms secretly clicked her tongue and silently followed him out. Suddenly, she heard the sound of wind coming from both sides and immediately became alert. "Don't be nervous, he's one of us." Yu Qianqiu glanced at her and said indifferently. Two black-clothed men quickly flashed over and stood side by side in front of Yu Qianqiu. They placed their right hands on their chests and bowed silently. The surrounding 600 black-clothed men also turned to face Yu Qianqiu and bowed in the same way. That indescribable aura was very stressful. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly, and the black-clothed men resumed their battle preparations. The two black-clothed men in front of him flashed to the left and right of Yu Qianqiu and waited for orders. The allure temptress was slightly stunned, and could only stand guard behind Yu Qianqiu. In the eyes of the people at the foot of the hill, Yu Qianqiu and the black-clothed men on his left and right were indifferently observing the battle situation below. Yan Bugui's expression changed the moment he saw Yu Qianqiu. This guy had ruined his plans time and time again. It was really infuriating. "Yu Qianqiu, why haven't you asked your men to make a move? When are you going to wait?" Qiu Wuyuan shouted from below. It could be seen that his qi was indeed running out after the continuous fierce battle with Dongfang Chang'ao. "Elder Qiu, I'm really sorry we're late. Please lead everyone away from the encirclement with Elder Dongfang. Don't worry about the matter of revenge, leave it to us, the rogue cultivators, so that we won't be affected." Yu Qianqiu shouted loudly. The allure temptress behind him rolled her eyes. They were obviously early, but he said they were late. She stretched out her sharp index finger and wanted to poke his waist again. Who knew that the two black-clothed men beside him would suddenly turn their heads and stare coldly at her? Although the allure temptress's cultivation was higher than the two of them, she still felt a little creeped out by their sharp gaze. She embarrassedly withdrew her hand. Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Wuyuan exchanged glances from afar. Then they shouted at the crowd together, "Everyone retreat from the rogue cultivators' encirclement, quickly." As they spoke, they struggled to break away from the entanglement of the few people. As they retreated, they did their best to provide cover for everyone. However, the foreign cultivators also understood that if they were to retreat, the opposing black-clothed men would most likely kill them. So, they all stuck close to them and pestered them. Yu Qianqiu frowned and shouted softly, Command support. Yes. The two black-clothed men replied in unison and quickly made an order with their hand signals. The surrounding black-clothed men immediately formed into a well-trained three-man battle formation. They quickly shrunk the encirclement and closed in on the people who were fighting. The allure temptress was shocked. Just a few simple hand signals were able to command so many tribulation passing stage cultivators as if they were one person. It was simply unbelievable. Yen Bugue and the old man in embroidered robes turned pale with fright. They felt a serious threat. Ziyi was somewhat dumbfounded as she looked at her surroundings. Those black-clothed people were cold and intimidating. Were these the same people that Yu Qianqiu had brought to wander around previously? The black-clothed men directly passed by the Hundred Flowers Palace, ignoring Ziyi and the old man in embroidered robes. They only surrounded the people outside the Hundred Flowers Palace. The encirclement shrank like a sieve, gradually filtering out the disciples of the various sects of the Cultivation Alliance and forcing the foreign cultivators back. There were also some people who wanted to take advantage of the entanglement to escape. However, as soon as they stepped forward, the groups of three in front of them immediately separated one person from each other. The encirclement formation was not chaotic at all. However, several people attacked at the same time. When the foreign cultivator released his flying sword, he didn't even have the chance to take it back. He was cut into several pieces on the spot and instantly killed. Occasionally there were a few who wanted to fly into the sky and escape, but they all met the same fate. The power displayed by the combined attack immediately shocked everyone present. The people that Yen Bugue brought with him no longer dared to test their sharpness and were all forced to retreat. All of the surviving Cultivation Alliance cultivators were finally able to safely retreat. In front of the Hundred Flowers Palace, within a radius of 100 meters, more than 30 foreign cultivators were surrounded in panic, not knowing what would happen next. As soon as Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Weiyuan came out, they immediately flew to Yu Qianqiu's side. When they saw the two black-clothed men beside him, they sized them up curiously. Qiu Weiyuan said in surprise, "Yu Qianqiu, are they those rogue cultivators?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the two people who were covered in blood and said with a smile, "If it's not them, where would I come from?" As he said this, he pointed at Yen Bugue and ordered his men, "Capture this person alive. I want to exchange him for hostages. Leave no one alive. Kill." The two of them quickly gave the order, and the encirclement formation changed again, becoming a small team of 10 people. Half of them quickly rushed into the encirclement, and the other half quickly closed the encirclement again. A strangulation battle with an absolute advantage was displayed in front of the surviving members of the Cultivation Alliance, and it really shocked everyone. The opponent almost only had one chance to attack. Once the magic weapons or magic treasures in their hands were used, they would never be able to return, and they themselves would become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Facing more than 300 cultivators at the Crossing Calamity stage, more than 30 cultivators at the Crossing Calamity stage were quickly separated. Facing a group attack alone and the opponent's cooperation was seamless, one could imagine the outcome. It was a battle without any suspense. The black-clothed and masked rogue cultivators killed all the opponents in a moment, at the cost of no casualties. Yen Bugue looked around in horror. He was really the only one left. He never dreamed that there were so many Crossing Calamity stage experts hiding in the Hundred Flowers Valley. Fortunately, the opponent obviously didn't want to kill him. The brocade-clothed old man looked down with a pale face. Although he wasn't surrounded, the purple clothes in front of him made it difficult for him to escape. Now the mother and daughter in his hands were his last life-saving talismans, and he could only hold on to them tightly. Yu Qianqiu shouted at him, "Old man in flowery clothes, listen up, I don't want to waste time with you. Let them go immediately and I will let you and Yen Bugue go." "Words are no proof. How can I believe you?" The brocade-clothed old man shouted immediately. "I, Yu Qianqiu, value my credibility the most, and I have never gone back on my words. I guarantee with my credibility you can rest assured," Yu Qianqiu said. The brocade-clothed old man sneered, "Credibility? Do you really think this old man is a 3-year-old child? If you swear an oath, this old man thinks it's better than credibility. You don't have the right to bargain with me. I said I will let you go, so of course I will keep my word." Yu Qianqiu coldly said, "I will count to 10 if you still don't let them go, Ziyi. Bring me that old man's head." Then he stared at Yen Bugue and said in a low voice, "And don't let him live." "No." Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Weiyuan both shouted. Dongfang Chang'ao shook his head, "Yu Qianqiu, we can negotiate." Bai Hua Fairy had already closed her eyes, while Yen Zixia tearfully stared at Yu Qianqiu, but he ignored her. I have never gone back on my words. If you have the guts, then save the mother and daughter right now. Yu Qianqiu coldly said to Dongfang Chang'eo, then turned around and began to count, 1, 2, 3. And his speed wasn't slow either. Zi slowly stepped forward. The brocade-clothed old man's face changed. He didn't think that she wouldn't even consider and forced him to make a decision, and in such a hurry. When he counted to 8, he finally shouted, "Wait. If you have something to say, then say it. I don't have the patience." Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted and continued to count, 9. "I agree." The brocade-clothed old man shouted, "I hope you can keep your promise." He really didn't have a choice. Even if he killed the mother and daughter and left Yan Bugui to escape from Zi, such a big matter would eventually reach Yan Zhuixing's ears. It's impossible to hide it. With Yan Zhuixing's relationship with Man Hu and the others, sooner or later they won't let him go. He might as well take a gamble as long as he can escape. Even letting the mother and daughter go is the same. At least he can explain it to Yan Zhuixing. What if they keep their promise? That's even better. Hearing that, Dongfang Chang'eo and Qiu Weiyuan's hearts that were already in their throats finally calmed down. It's good that you agree. In this world you can doubt anything, but Yu Qianqiu's character, you definitely don't need to doubt it. It's always been tested. Yu Qianqiu nodded and casually said. Chapter 413. Everyone's eyes were focused on the old man, cautiously waiting for his next move. No one noticed. Unknowingly, Yu Qianqiu has become the leader of this place. In fact, this was also his goal. He could have acted earlier, that way the Cultivation Alliance wouldn't have to pay such a heavy price, but he waited until the Cultivation Alliance couldn't hold on any longer, when even the brave Dongfang Chang'eo and Qiu Weiyuan were at a disadvantage. Only then did he act. Although adding flowers to a brocade is good, it's not as good as sending charcoal in the snow to achieve his goal. After the Cultivation Alliance sacrificed hundreds of lives, he managed to turn the tide. Now he's the leader here. Dongfang Chang'eo and Qiu Weiyuan can't interfere. From today onwards, no one in the cultivation world can say that he, the hero, is the scum of the cultivation world. He's long since disliked this title. Now that Yan Bugui and the others have arrived, of course he has to take advantage of the situation. Since you dare to call me a scum of the cultivation world, then I'll make you pay with your blood to take back this title. From the moment he was watching the battle from the shadows, he already had this thought. Only when the situation was out of his expectations did he start to interfere. Although he agreed, the old man was still a bit hesitant, but in the end he still gritted his teeth and pushed by Hua Fairy and Yan Zixia away. Dongfang Chang'eo and Qiu Weiyuan quickly went to protect the mother and daughter. The old man looked at Yan Bugui, who was surrounded below, then shouted to Yu Qianqiu, "Yu Qianqiu, I've let them go. It's time to fulfill your promise. Your worries are unnecessary. I've already said that you can doubt anything, but you definitely don't need to doubt my character. I've always been a man of my words. I've never discounted them." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. "Let them go." With that order, the black-clothed men surrounding Yan Bugui quickly moved away. The embroidered-robed old man immediately shouted, "Let's go." He immediately shot into the sky. Yan Bugui looked at Bai Hua Fairy and Yan Zixia with a complicated gaze, but didn't dare to stay any longer and also shot into the sky to chase after them. The two of them broke through the seal formation above the 100 Flowers Valley and quickly disappeared. "Retreat." Yu Qianqiu nodded. The black-robed men on both sides immediately issued an order. The black-robed men below quickly collected the storage pouches of the dead foreign cultivators. Then they flew across the sky and disappeared into the surrounding mountains as if they had never appeared. Everyone was stunned. Could these people really be those rogue cultivators? Even when retreating, they didn't forget to scavenge some things. They really had the demeanor of those poor rogue cultivators. However, at least he still had some morals and didn't touch the belongings of the dead disciples of the various sections. Otherwise, it would really be difficult to recover them. Actually, it had nothing to do with morality. Yu Qianqiu knew that these second-rate disciples didn't have anything valuable on them. Why would they do something so shameful and cause trouble? On the other hand, the guests that came from afar probably had quite a bit of money on them, so he should take them back to check. Ziyi flashed back to Yu Qianqiu's side. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but look at Yan Zixia's sorrowful eyes. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly, thinking, "Eldest miss, please don't blame me for being cruel just now. The crueler I am, the safer you and your mother will be. I hope you understand." At this time, the exhausted Bai Zizong's group of 4 ran over and bowed, saying, "Thank you, sir and Miss Ziyi, for saving our lives." Ziyi looked at the ragged clothes of the 4 people and frowned, but didn't say anything. "No need to thank me, it's what I should do." Yu Qianqiu nodded and smiled. He also noticed the 4 people just now. It seems that the shopkeepers and workers of the 4 great family shops were almost all killed in order to protect them. Luckily they managed to save their lives, otherwise a few people who shouldn't have died would have died in vain. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. You guys talk. A green light flashed from his sleeve, and Yu Qianqiu stepped on his sword and left. The temptress didn't even know the 4 people, so what was there to talk about? Of course she followed them. Ziyi glanced at the 4 people. What was there to talk about? She only felt disgusted, so she sprung away. Everyone watched the 3 people leave, and then looked at the outside of the 100 Flowers Palace. There were corpses everywhere, and the survivors from each sect started to collect the corpses. The market in the 100 Flowers Valley was already deserted. When the 3 of them returned to the 100 Flowers house, there was actually no one there. They probably all went to help just now. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his stomach and said, I didn't eat anything at first and now there's no one. What bad luck. There should be ingredients in the kitchen. You guys go and rest first, I'll send them up later. The temptress smiled and slowly walked to the back. She really did look like a servant. Yu Qianqiu didn't stand on ceremony and directly went upstairs. After entering the room, he sat in front of the round table in the center and poured himself a cup of tea. As he drank, he looked at Ziyi and asked, If you have anything you want to ask, just ask. Don't stifle yourself. This girl's doubts were all written on her face, and she didn't know how to hide it. Ziyi clasped her hands together and fidgeted for a while. Suddenly, she looked at the door guiltily and turned back to ask, Do you want me to massage your shoulders? What? Yu Qianqiu was stunned and thought he heard wrong. Do you want me to massage your shoulders? Ziyi repeated. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. He didn't know what was wrong with this woman. She actually wanted to do such a thing. Even if she gave face to her father, he wouldn't dare to let her do it. So he shook his head and said, No need, no need. If you have something to say, just say it. Ziyi frowned slightly. It seemed that she was a little unhappy that he didn't let her massage him. She bit her lips and sat in front of Yu Qianqiu. She asked, Those loose cultivators are not loose cultivators at all. Where did you find them? Why don't I know? Yu Qianqiu replied without hesitation, Of course, I hired them with money. If you don't pay, who would help you for free? Ziyi's expression became serious and said, The joint attack of these people is very powerful. If I was surrounded by them, I wouldn't be able to last long if I didn't escape. You must have spent a lot of money to hire so many people at once, right? The sound of people coming upstairs came from outside. Yu Qianqiu didn't deny it and just replied with an N. After a while, the temptress came in with a pile of food, and the table was almost full. The people from various sects were busy cleaning up the mess outside, but the 3 of them were eating and drinking comfortably in the room. The temptress took the opportunity to pour wine for Yu Qianqiu and asked, Just now, that old man in embroidered robes had the lives of Guan Muxue and her daughter in his hands. You let him go and that's still acceptable. But you clearly had the chance to kill Yan Bugui. Why did you use him to exchange for the lives of the mother and daughter? You let him escape for nothing. Yu Qianqiu scratched his nose and thought to himself, The Yan father and son are targeting the Cultivation Alliance, not me. My interference has already made them very unhappy. If I really kill Yan Bugui, then just wait and see. Yan Zhuixing will definitely lead a group of people to fight me. The entire Chinese cultivation world needs to form the Cultivation Alliance to be able to fight them. I have nothing better to do. If I want to become enemies with these powerful people who killed my father, I'd be more likely to have a problem with my brain. You guys continue to fight, I'll just cheer you on from the side. Don't think that I'll get too involved. Yu Qianqiu drank a mouthful of wine and ate a mouthful of food, then casually explained, Some time ago, in order to split the money, the previous palace master of the 10,000 demons, Senior Yan Wuchen, had given me face. How could I have the cheek to kill his only son? Just take it as returning the old man's favor. The temptress nodded slightly. She had also heard about the matter of splitting the money, but she was more or less confused. There was no other reason, but the key was that this little fox was too sincere, which made her suspicious. On the coast of the East Sea, the heroes of the Cultivation Alliance, the righteous and the evil sects were stationed there. The defensive line was pulled apart along the coast, spanning hundreds of miles. This was originally a place where the coastal residents lived and fished for generations. However, in order to not implicate these ordinary people, the Fuxian Island used its control over the secular imperial power to force the local residents to move away. Although it was done with good intentions, the relocation was not a small number. Therefore, hundreds of thousands of people were forced to leave their homes. For a time, it caused public discontent and almost led to a civil uprising. In the end, it was General Wei who led the army to suppress it forcefully. They barely managed to move away, but the resettlement of hundreds of thousands of people became a problem. However, corrupt officials were running rampant in the imperial court, and the money allocated by the upper echelons was embezzled layer by layer. How much of it could fall into the hands of the people? If the livelihood of hundreds of thousands of people became a problem, it was only a matter of time before something big happened. This was not something the cultivation world would care about, and no one would care about. They had already fought with the foreign cultivators a few times, and both sides had suffered some losses. Currently, both sides were actively adjusting, preparing to compete with each other again. However, at this time, the Cultivation Alliance suddenly received news that Yen Bugui had secretly brought dozens of tribulation passing stage experts to attack the headquarters of the Cultivation Alliance, the Hundred Flowers Valley. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu led more than 600 loose cultivators and arrived in time. Almost all of Yen Bugui's group were killed. Unfortunately, in order to save Bai Hua Fairy and her daughter, Yen Bugui and a late-stage tribulation passing stage expert were released. When the various sects heard this news, they couldn't believe it. Just the loose cultivators under Yu Qianqiu could kill dozens of tribulation passing stage experts? So they all sent messages to their own people to ask for more details. The result was that the more than 600 loose cultivators led by Yu Qianqiu were not ordinary loose cultivators. They were all tribulation passing stage experts. The various sects were shocked when they heard this. More than 600 tribulation passing stage experts? After confirming it several times, they finally believed it was true. The various sects gathered again to discuss this matter. It was a crucial moment in the war. How could they not use so many experts in the rear? So the Luo sect suggested that no matter where those loose cultivators came from, Yu Qianqiu could leave 50 loose cultivators to continue defending the Hundred Flowers Valley, and the remaining 500 loose cultivators would be transferred to the various sects to prepare for the war. This proposal was unanimously supported by the various sections. Everyone knew very well why they did this. No one could rest assured that Yu Qianqiu had such a strong force in his hands. Especially sects like the Luo sect who had a grudge against him, it was better to split them up as soon as possible. Of course, jealousy was also a practical reason. All the sects wanted to take a bite out of it. The news of the transfer was immediately sent back. When Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Wuyuan received the news, they looked at each other. Anyone with a brain would know what it meant, not to mention someone like Yu Qianqiu who didn't want to be at a disadvantage. Dongfang Chang'ao said in a low voice, "Brother Qiu, you and Yu Qianqiu have always been brothers. I think it's better for you to make the decision." Chapter 4:14. There's no need for me to explain what this means. Qiu Wuyuan tossed the jade archive in his hand onto the tea table and chuckled. Didn't you see how obedient those people are towards Yu Qianqiu? Do you think Yu Qianqiu will obediently hand over such a useful subordinate? Whether he's willing or not, one of us has to go talk to him. Otherwise, we won't be able to answer to the various sections. Dongfang Chang'ao said helplessly. He just saved our lives and we're going to cut his flesh off. Who has the guts to say such a thing? Qiu Wuyuan slapped the tea table beside him. Dongfang Chang'ao frowned. They didn't see the situation at the time. It's easy for them to talk. But since my supporting Immortal Island and the 10,000 demons have agreed, and we're the ones in charge here, only you and I can talk to him. Talk my ass. Qiu Wuyuan shot to his feet. He pointed to the east and said angrily, "They only dared to speak so shamelessly because they're far away from us. Believe it or not, if they were face to face, none of them would dare to say something like that to Yu Qianqiu's face. With that brat's virtue, no matter how high your cultivation base is, no matter who you are, he dares to kill you on the spot. Which sect would dare to fart like that? The decree of the 10,000 demons is also here. Would you dare to disobey it?" Dongfang Chang'ao asked. When Qiu Wuyuan heard that, he was so angry that he glared at him and sat down again. Dongfang Chang'ao stood up and sighed. "We can't waste our time here. Let's go. We'll go together. If we're going to lose face, we'll lose face together." Upstairs in the Hundred Flowers house, Yu Qianqiu was pinching his chin and smiling coldly at the window. The moment the coast of the East Sea came out with the results of the discussion, Bai Shan had immediately sent a message to him and had the Bai clan's people inform him of the news. He waited there to see who in the Cultivation Alliance would tell him the good news. The Allure Enchantress, who was leaning on the side, frowned slightly. She was secretly the leader of the Pink Sect, so she naturally knew the results of the discussion. Yu Qianqiu glanced at her and sneered, "None of you so-called sects are good people. If I had known earlier, I would have killed all the disciples of the various sects in the 100 Flowers Valley. A bunch of people who bite the hand that feeds them. The temptress rolled her eyes and said, "Why are you scolding me too? Most of the sects agree. How can a small pink sect like me stop it? Besides, are you really that easy to talk to? Will you hand him over?" "Umph." Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly but didn't say anything. He thought to himself, "There's more to come, let's play slowly. Hey, let me ask you, what's the relationship between the 600 lone cultivators and the hero?" The allure enchantress smiled and leaned over, then poked his waist with her finger. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and said, "There's no relationship at all, don't think too much." Ziyi, who was sitting obediently at the side, widened her eyes and looked at the two of them. She could understand the first part of the conversation, but the more she listened, the more confused she became. Seeing the two of them being intimate with each other, an inexplicable feeling of jealousy arose in her heart. "They're here," Yu Qianzhou said as he looked at Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Wuyuan. The allure enchantress looked over, and the two people below also saw the two people at the window above. They looked at each other and walked into the 100 Flowers Valley in silence. Once the two of them entered the room, Yu Qianzhou waved his hand at them and said, "You don't have to say anything, I already know. For the sake of the big picture, I don't have any opinions, but to be honest, I can't make the decision for those lone cultivators. If you have anything to say it to them face to face. I won't get involved in case they say that I'm trying to ruin things. Let's go. Follow me to see them." The two of them were stunned, then they thought about it and realized that it was true. The people from the 4 major clans had probably told him before they did. But this was also good, to avoid awkwardness. Thus, the two of them didn't say a word and followed him out. However, they were cursing in their hearts. Is this guy that easy to talk to? Once they left the 100 Flowers Valley, they saw people bowing to Yu Qianzhou. After all, he saved everyone's lives. Yu Qianzhou smiled and waved his hand along the way. The group left the 100 Flowers Valley. Yu Qianzhou threw out a flying sword and stepped on it. The few of them landed in a remote valley. Looking around and not seeing anyone, Yu Qianzhou clapped his hands. Suddenly, someone shouted from a dark corner of the valley, "Who's there?" "The Heavenly King covers the Earth Tiger." Yu Qianzhou shook his head and said something that confused the few of them. Someone in the dark immediately replied, "The pagoda suppresses the river demon." The few of them immediately understood that it was a secret code. They were all shocked by such a classic secret code and looked at each other. A few figures shot over. They were the loose cultivators. Most of the black cloth covering their heads had been lifted up, revealing their noses and mouths. Their mouths were stained with a lot of mud, and they were chewing as if they were eating something. Dongfang Chang'ao and the others shifted their gazes to their hands. Some of them were holding wild sweet potatoes, while others were holding wild mountain spirits. Most of them had been bitten off. They were eating this, but they didn't seem to have been washed, so they just casually peeled the dirt and ate it. The few of them were confused and didn't know what was going on. However, Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed, "Brothers, I've let you down." Sigh. Elder Dongfang of Supporting Celestial Island and Elder Qiu of 10,000 Demons have brought the decree of the Cultivation Alliance. Do as you wish, I won't say anything else. After that, he quietly walked to the side with his back facing the others. Let them down? What did this guy do? The few of them were even more confused. Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Wuyuan exchanged glances. Qiu Wuyuan took a step forward and coughed. "We've received a decree from the Cultivation Alliance. In order to deal with the foreign cultivators' provocation, we've decided to transfer 500 people from your group to support them. Prepare to depart today." The leader spat out the thing in his mouth and waved his hand at Qiu Wuyuan. "What *T decree? We're done, we're not going to do it anymore. When they took the money they didn't give us a share, but when they fought for their lives they thought of us. Damn it, we haven't even gotten a single spirit stone until now. We've been digging for these things in the mountains every day to eat. What a joke." As he said that, he threw away the half of the wild sweet potato. The few people beside him also threw away the things in their hands and shouted, "That's right, if you don't give us money we're done, we're done." They wiped their mouths and pulled down their masks again. Dongfang Chang'ao frowned, and Qiu Wuyuan's face darkened. Neither of them were fools. In the end they made such a big scene to scare people. In the end it was all for money. It was very Yu Qianzhou's style. If it wasn't Yu Qianzhou's instruction, then it would be a miracle. Ziyi nodded in agreement with these masked rogue cultivators' statement that they wouldn't do it if they didn't give them money. However, she was a little confused as to why they would eat this thing. Allure Beauty couldn't help but smile. If this guy wanted to do it, why didn't he make it more realistic? Why did he have to make it so full of flaws? Would a tribulation passing stage cultivator be so hungry that they would dig wild sweet potatoes in the mountains to eat? With their cultivation, it wouldn't be a problem for them to abstain from food for half a year. Asking for money with this reason was too lame. Yu Qianshou, what do you mean? Qiu Weiyuan turned around and asked. His face darkened as if he had been tricked. Yu Qianshou snorted coldly. He thought to himself, it's good that you understand. I'm just afraid that you don't, or you'll really think that I'm an idiot. He slowly turned around and said, I don't mean anything. What they mean is their own, it has nothing to do with me. Dongfang Chang'ao patted Qiu Weiyuan's arm, signaling him to calm down. He walked out and said to the rogue cultivators, We've already delivered the decree. If you have any requests, why don't you tell me? I'll pass it on to the Cultivation Alliance. Elder Dongfang is wise. The leader of the masked rogue cultivators cupped his fists and said, We're all rogue cultivators. When the Cultivation Alliance doesn't need us, they don't even bother to look us in the eye. Now that we can use it, they want us to risk our lives for a so-called decree. What a good plan. We have the elderly and the young to take care of, and we don't have a sect to guarantee us. If we die, we'll lose everything. Now we only have one request, and that is to give us some settlement allowance. That way, even if we die, we can't say anything. We have the elderly and the young to take care of? Settlement allowance? Why does it sound like something from the secular world? Dongfang Chang'ao was slightly stunned. He almost didn't understand what they meant, but he understood that they still wanted money. He took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. He said, How much money do you want? You can tell me directly. I'll pass it on to the Cultivation Alliance. As for whether they'll give it to you, I can't guarantee. The leader of the masked rogue cultivators said, We have more than 600 brothers. Each of us will ask for 100,000 upper-grade spirit stones. If it's less than that, then there's no need to say any more. More than 60 million upper-grade spirit stones. You're asking for an exorbitant price. Qiu Weiyuan sneered. Elder Qiu, you can say whatever you want. In short, don't force anyone. If you give us the money, we'll do it. If not, we'll just leave. The world is a big place. I believe that if we 600 brothers unite together, it won't be difficult to get 60 million. What do you think, Elder Qiu? The leader of the masked rogue cultivators said calmly, but everyone could hear the threat in his words. Dongfang Chang'ao raised his hand to stop Qiu Weiyuan, who was a little impulsive. He nodded and said, I understand what you mean. I'll pass on the message. Let's put it this way for now. I'll let you know when I get a reply. Without another word, Qiu Weiyuan took the lead and flew away. Dongfang Chang'ao cupped his hands at everyone and left as well. Good job. You guys continue, I won't disturb you anymore. Yu Qianshou said with a smile. He threw out a flying sword and flew away. The two girls followed behind him. Just like that, the few of them slipped away, but they didn't get any practical results. When the various sects received the news, many of them immediately cursed. However, they still felt that letting these people gather together was a threat. They had to find a way to break them up. At the same time, they all wanted to recruit their own sections. Especially in this situation, everyone knew what it meant to have a group of tribulation passing stage cultivators. A slightly bigger sect could fork out 60 million upper-grade spirit stones each, but no one wanted to let the 600 rogue cultivators have it all to themselves. Therefore, the various sects came up with a way to pool the money. According to the calculation of 100,000 upper-grade spirit stones per person, the 600 rogue cultivators were divided up. When Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Weiyuan received the news, they went to look for the rogue cultivators again. Who knew that these guys wouldn't act until they saw the rabbit? They insisted on getting the spirit stones first. Chapter 4:15. In the face of such a request, you couldn't say that they were too much, but they still didn't know what was good for them. Qiu Weiyuan's face darkened and he didn't say a word. He had never been threatened like this before. Dongfang Chang'ao asked expressionlessly, How many people do you have? Tell me and I'll try replying to the Cultivation Alliance. 632 people. As long as we get the money, we promise we'll rush over immediately. Don't worry, we'll do what we say. Okay. Dongfang Chang'ao agreed without hesitation. The two of them returned and once again conveyed the loose cultivator's request. Although the sects were furious when they heard the news, it was worth it to be able to poach all of Yu Qianshou's subordinates and turn him into a loner. Therefore, they ordered the people in the 100 Flowers Valley to raise the money and give it to Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Weiyuan. The sects didn't believe that these people would run away with the money and harm the interests of the sections. Although 600 people in the early stage of tribulation passing were powerful, they couldn't withstand the anger of the entire Chinese cultivation world. In the headquarters of the Cultivation Alliance, Qiu Wuyuan held the storage bag in his hand and snorted, "Now that the spirit stones are ready, let's see what else they can do, unless they want to go against the entire Cultivation Alliance." Dongfang Chang'ao frowned slightly. Yu Qianqiu had been too calm for the past 2 days, as if this had nothing to do with him at all. Could he really hand over these people so easily? "Did you notice something wrong with Yu Qianqiu?" Dongfang Chang'ao asked. "Yes. This kid never does things that are disadvantageous to him." "I'm a little uncertain now," Qiu Wuyuan said suspiciously. "There must be something strange when something is out of the ordinary." Dongfang Chang'ao pondered for a while, then shook his head and said, "Forget it. The Cultivation Alliance is in the wrong in this matter. We just need to do our duty as a messenger. So, let's go again." The two of them walked out of the headquarters of the Cultivation Alliance and saw that the shops of the various sects were hung with white soul-summoning banners. Many people were wearing sackcloth. Tonight there would be a memorial ceremony. Naturally, it was to mourn the dead disciples of the various sections. Upon seeing this, both of their hearts sank. Many disciples from supporting Immortals Island and 10,000 demons had also died. When they passed by the 100 Flowers house, Yu Qianqiu was holding a cup of tea and chatting with the 100 Charms enchantress. When he saw the two of them passing by, he waved his hand in a friendly manner, and the two of them nodded slightly in response. After watching the two of them leave the 100 Flowers Valley, the allure temptress turned around and smiled. "Little fox, what are you up to this time? Can you tell me a little?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head innocently and sighed, "I'm obviously living a peaceful life here. Why do you think I'm up to no good?" "So, my heart was originally directed to the bright moon, but the bright moon shines on the ditch. Then I'll wait and see. I hope there won't be a day where I reveal my foxtail." The allure temptress giggled. Ziyi, who was at the side, sadly realized that she was a little unnecessary here. Outside the 100 Flowers Valley, Qiu Wuyuan frowned and said, "I'm a little curious. That allure temptress has been in hiding for so many years. How did she end up with Yu Qianqiu?" "You can go and ask her. See if you can find out the reason," Dongfang Chang'ao said and flew towards the place where the wandering cultivators were hiding. Qiu Wuyuan glared at him and followed. Ever since the battle, the two of them had become much more harmonious. They were still in the hidden and dark valley. The two of them looked around at the dark and damp environment. They really had to hand it to these people. They could actually hide here every day without moving. After the disgusting cut secret signal, the few people appeared again. Dongfang Chang'ao threw the storage bag in his hand to the leader of the wandering cultivators and said, 63,200,000 upper-grade spiritual stones, not a single one less. You guys take a look." The leader nodded and said, "All right. Tomorrow morning, we'll gather outside the 100 Flowers Valley and immediately head to the coast of the East Sea." Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Wuyuan looked at each other. Obviously, they did not expect the other party to agree so easily. Qiu Wuyuan said in a deep voice, "I've given you the spiritual stones. I hope you guys can keep your promise. I don't want 632 people to be missing." "Don't worry, Elder Qiu. Tomorrow you'll see that all 632 wandering cultivators who showed up outside the 100 Flowers Palace will appear outside the 100 Flowers Valley for you to count. We won't go back on our words." The leader of the wandering cultivators promised in a powerful voice. "That's great. But I hope you guys remember not to run away with the money. Yu Qianqiu won't be able to bear the consequences." Qiu Wuyuan warned. The meaning of his words was clear. "We have already determined that you guys are Yu Qianqiu's people. If you run away, the Cultivation Alliance will not look for you. They will look for Yu Qianqiu to settle the score." He suspected that the most likely thing these people would do was to take off their masks and run away. These people were obviously not the wandering cultivators from before. No one knew them. If they ran away, it would be really hard to find them. "Thank you for your advice, Elder Qiu. See you tomorrow." The leader of the wandering cultivators sneered and waved his hand. The few of them went back into the darkness. It was night and the moon was bright. The market in the 100 Flowers Valley that was originally bright all night was closed. The center of the square that had been cleared out was piled with firewood, burning it to the sky. People from various sects gathered in circles and sat cross-legged. Many of them held a piece of wooden board in their hands and wrote the names of their dead disciples on it. Then people from various sects threw these wooden boards into the raging fire. This was a unique ceremony in the Chinese cultivation world. There were no complicated ceremonies and no one spoke. It was very quiet. The only thing that could be heard was the sound of the burning fire and the crackling of the wood. As the wooden boards with names written on them were thrown into the fire, the dead disciples were completely cut off from this world. Tonight, the people from the various sects would silently sit here for the entire night, mourning the deaths of their fellow sect members. The Allure Beauty came upstairs with wine and food. She looked around the room and found that Yu Qianqiu was no longer in the room. Only Ziyi was leaning on the window, looking at the square where the ceremony was held. Looking at her, she seemed to be curious about this kind of ceremony. "Miss Ziyi, where did Yu Qianqiu go?" The Allure Beauty walked over and asked. Ziyi raised her hand and pointed to the opposite roof, saying, "There." The Allure Beauty looked out of the window and looked in the direction of her finger. She saw Yu Qianqiu standing on the opposite roof with his hands behind his back. He was in a daze under the bright moon. No one knew what he was thinking about. "Let's go up too." The Allure Beauty looked at the dishes in her hands and said. Ziyi nodded and took the lead to go up the opposite roof. The Allure Beauty held the things in her hands and floated up. When the two of them came, Yu Qianqiu looked back slightly and was a little indifferent. He turned his head and looked at the raging fire in the square. The two of them didn't disturb him. The Allure Beauty gave Ziyi a look and passed the tray in her hands to her. Then she turned around and flashed back into the opposite house. The two of them had been together for a few days and were gradually able to accommodate each other. After a while, the Allure Beauty came back with a short table on the couch. She bent down and set it up on the roof. Then she made a gesture to Ziyi. Ziyi's eyes lit up and understood the Allure Beauty's meaning. The two of them quickly took out the dishes and placed them on the short table. The Allure Beauty poured a cup of wine and walked to Yu Qianqiu's side. She smiled and said, "Why are you so focused? What are you thinking?" Ziyi looked at the two of them and looked at the big moon above her head. She picked up her chopsticks and ate happily. It seemed like it was the first time she ate under the moon. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly and said, "Think about how many people will remember them after they die. If I, Yu Qianqiu, become like them one day, how many people will remember me, Yu Qianqiu?" As soon as he said that, a few old turtles flew past under the bright moon, leaving behind a few ear-piercing screeches. In the present age, the old turtle was regarded as an inauspicious symbol. Coincidentally, it appeared when Yu Qianqiu said those words. The Allure Enchantress raised her head and took a look. Her expression changed slightly as she pouted. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and took the cup from her hand. As soon as he put it to his lips, he suddenly paused. The Allure Beauty followed his gaze and saw that Bai Hua Fairy had personally led Bai Hua Palace's disciples to the square, blocking the gap formed by the sect's encirclement. "I heard that the 600 or so loose cultivators have really accepted the Cultivation Alliance's decree and will be heading to the Eastern Sea tomorrow. If Yan Bugui brings people to forcefully welcome Guan Muxue and her daughter, who can stop them with just the people here?" The Allure Beauty looked away and said worriedly, "Don't worry, they've suffered a great loss this time, so they won't come back for a while. Even if Yan Bugui wants to come, those foreign cultivators won't risk the lives of their disciples for his own selfish reasons. After all, it's enough to scare them for a while. Under such a situation, Yan Bugui would not dare to act rashly." Yu Qianqiu smiled confidently as he drained the wine in his cup in one gulp. It was as if he was passing judgment on the world. The Allure Beauty looked at him and was a bit surprised. A complicated look flashed through her eyes. She took the cup from his hand and said, "You've really calculated everything, but I don't believe that you'll really give those people to the Cultivation Alliance for nothing?" Yu Qianqiu smiled noncommittally. This woman always talked about this topic after a few sentences. He changed the topic and said, "Palace Lord Yi, after the defeat of the Magical Illusion Palace, did you also hold such a memorial ceremony for the disciples who died in the battle?" Hearing this, the complexion of the Allure Beauty changed. She could no longer smile. With a somewhat absent-minded expression, she cast her gaze towards the raging flames on the square. She softly sighed, bowed, and placed the wine cup in her hand on the short table. Sitting cross-legged on the roof, she took out a zither from her storage bag and began to play it. The melancholy in the music was hard to suppress. The sudden sound of the zither attracted the attention of everyone in the square. Seeing that it was the three of them, they silently looked away and continued to meditate. On the other hand, Bai Hua Fairy and her daughter's gazes lingered on Yu Qianqiu for a bit. Purple Dress bit her chopsticks, looked at the Allure Beauty for a bit, then continued to eat her food. After getting rid of the Allure Beauty's question, Yu Qianqiu looked at the white banners in the square, thinking about the 600 subordinates who would set off tomorrow. He didn't know what would happen to them, so he couldn't help but feel a bit down. Thinking about the Utopia Alliance's army of almost 10,000 ready to go, his fighting spirit rose again. Listening to the Allure Beauty's melancholy music, he suddenly felt a sense of pride to compete against fate. He turned around and picked up the wine pot and cup, poured himself a cup, then another. After thinking for a bit, he gave the cup to the moon and shook his head. Circulating his true essence, he suppressed the zither music and slowly recited, singing to wine, how long is life? Like the morning dew, the days past are bitter. Generous, unforgettable. Only Kong can solve my worries. Indigo collar, my heart is long. But for my lord I have pondered until now. Every word was sent out clearly in the square, and everyone looked over in surprise. The recitation and melancholy music were supposed to be incompatible, but it produced another kind of beauty. They complemented each other, and it was extremely wonderful. The Allure Beauty stopped playing in shock and looked at him in a daze. This man gave her a feeling that he was becoming more and more unfathomable. He usually looked like he wasn't serious, but he was actually very astute. It was already surprising that he could play the zither and compose music, but in the blink of an eye he could come up with such wonderful lyrics. It had to be said that he was a serious talent. Even if a talent like him wasn't in the cultivation world, he would definitely be famous in the secular world. Purple Dress stuck her chopsticks in her mouth again, staring at him with wide eyes. She also realized that she couldn't see through him anymore. The people below could not help but think, singing to wine, how long is there? Like the morning dew, the days past are bitter. Generous, unforgettable. Only Kong can solve my worries. But for my lord my heart is long. But for my lord I have pondered until now. After thinking about it, they all looked at Yu Qianqiu with a lot of emotions. From the words itself, it seems like he was lamenting about life, thinking about someone. This was a perfect eulogy. Bai Hua Fairy stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was drinking to the moon on the rooftop, and nodded slightly, then turned to look at her daughter. Seeing that she was a bit lost, she silently closed her eyes. As the music stopped, Yu Qianqiu also realized that his emotions were a bit messy, so he drank the rest of the wine in his cup and returned to Hundred Flowers' house. The next day, Dongfang Chang'eo and Qiu Wuyuan arrived at the Hundred Flowers Valley early in the morning to wait. When the sun rose, the masked rogue cultivators really did come, gathering in front of the two of them from all directions. The leader walked over and clasped his fist. We are ready, please give us the pass. As it was the time of the war, every sect had sent people to search for suspicious cultivators. Without the pass of the Cultivation Alliance, it would be a bit troublesome, there might even be a misunderstanding. Dongfang Chang'eo and Qiu Wuyuan checked and nodded. Sure enough, they were all tribulation-passing realm early-stage cultivators, no one messed around. But then the two of them frowned. Qiu Wuyuan shouted, you took 63. 2 million high-grade spirit stones, there should be 632 people, why are you still missing 2? Elder Qiu, no need to rush, we are true to our words, the other 2 should be here soon, just wait for a bit, the leader said. Just as Qiu Wuyuan snorted, someone shouted, they're coming, ah, I almost overslept. The voice was so familiar, Dongfang Chang'eo and Qiu Wuyuan's expression changed at the same time. Yu Qianqiu smiled and clasped his fist at the two of them, then turned to the group of rogue cultivators. Are you ready? I just borrowed 10 large flying mystic instruments from the shops of the 4 major families, it should be enough to send us there. Dongfang Chang'eo frowned. Qiu Wuyuan said in a deep voice, Yu Qianqiu, why are you here again? Yu Qianqiu turned around and said, Zi and I are both rogue cultivators, and we each received 100,000 high-grade spirit stones yesterday. Naturally, we have to go to the coast of East Sea to participate in the war according to the agreement between you and the rogue cultivators. Beauty of 100 Charms was surprised. Yu Qianqiu, you and Zi are going to the coast of East Sea too? What about me? Yu Qianqiu snickered, you're not a rogue cultivator and you didn't get any money, of course you have to stay here. He didn't tell her, although he was afraid that the secret would be leaked, and he also wanted to find a reason to dump her. With her around, there were many things that he couldn't do freely. In fact, he also didn't tell Zi, but she definitely wouldn't doubt his decision. You want to dump me and leave me here alone? The 100 Charm Enchantress shouted in a delicate voice. Dongfang Chang'eo frowned. Yu Qianqiu, the Cultivation Alliance didn't send you a decree, why are you going there? That's not right. The Cultivation Alliance allocated 63,200,000 high-grade spirit stones, including me and Zi. There were 632 rogue cultivators outside the 100 Flower Palace. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at the masked rogue cultivators. Although they didn't ask for my name, they didn't ask for theirs either. But they already gave me the money, isn't it asking me to go too? Do they want me and Ze to wear masked clothes too? That's fine, luckily I have a few more here. As he spoke, he really took out 2 masked clothes with the word Rogue Cultivator embroidered on them from his storage bag, threw one to Ze and put it on in front of everyone. Ze looked at him with the clothes and put on the masked clothes too. After the 2 of them put on, they immediately stood among the Rogue Cultivators. The leader of the masked Rogue Cultivators stretched out his hand and said, 632 Rogue Cultivators are here, elders, please give us the pass so we can report to the Cultivation Alliance as soon as possible. Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Weiyuan looked at each other. So Yu Qianqiu was waiting for them here. Just think about it, all the sects treated Yu Qianqiu as the representative of the Rogue Cultivators, but they didn't expect him to be a Rogue Cultivator too. In fact, let alone the sects, the 2 of them also neglected this point. This was bad. No one told these Rogue Cultivators that once they arrived at the coast of East Sea, they would be separated into different sections. They were going to be divided according to the method of distributing tasks after they arrived. If Yu Qianqiu brought them there, who among the sects would be able to poach them from his hands? This guy could beat or scold them at any time, not to mention he brought so many loyal subordinates with him, he was even less afraid of anyone. It's over, all the sects were cheated of more than 60 million by him for nothing. Yu Qianqiu, what are you trying to do? Qiu Weiyuan shouted with a livid face. What am I trying to do? Yu Qianqiu sneered, took off his mask and said coldly, of course I'm following the decree of the Cultivation Alliance, going to the coast of East Sea to participate in the battle. What? Did I say something wrong? You. Qiu Weiyuan was so angry that he couldn't speak. If he really sent this guy over, the various sects would not be able to poach him and lose a large sum of money. It would be strange if they didn't settle the score with him and Dongfang Chang'ao later. Chapter 416. What's wrong with me? Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and said, everyone knows that I'm a man of my word. Since I've already accepted the money, I will never go back on my word. I will never be a villain who goes back on his word. As for this, you can rest assured. Even if we don't have the token, we will still barge our way through. We will not be intimidated by any obstacles. His words were clearly a threat. His meaning was clear. If you don't give me the token, don't blame me for not warning you in advance if you run into any sects checking on us on the way and something unexpected happens. Qiu Weiyuan was so angry that he laughed and said, you're a man of your word? I wonder who would believe you. It seems like you've always been the one praising yourself. Whether you're a man of your word or not, it's not up to you to decide. It's up to others to judge you. *CK. How dare you doubt my character? Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow and said, the world has many misunderstandings about me. If I don't say it out loud, who would know that I, Yu Qianqiu, am a man of my word? You're twisting words and forcing logic. Qiu Weiyuan was about to refute him when Dongfang Chang'ao waved an arm in front of him, stopping him from speaking any further. With his other hand he took out a jade archive and tossed it to Yu Qianqiu, saying, the token is here. Hurry up and report back. Qiu Weiyuan was taken aback. He looked at Dongfang Chang'ao in confusion, but the latter shook his head slightly. Yu Qianqiu caught the jade archive and tossed it to the masked rogue cultivator behind him. He glanced at the 2 of them and spat, damn it. I didn't expect to save an ingrate. If I had known this would happen, I would have just let Yen Bugui and the others kill him. Why would I want to interfere in this matter? I'll be at ease if they're all dead. It'll save me some trouble. Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Weiyuan's expressions changed. Although the other party's words were harsh, he did save their lives. Compared to the debt of saving their lives, 1 or 2 harsh words were really nothing. Therefore, the 2 of them did not say anything else. Seeing that there was no response from the other party and that he had obtained the pass, Yu Qianqiu could not be bothered to argue anymore. He took out a bunch of flying artifacts from his storage bag and distributed them to the masked loose cultivator. He kept 6 of them and kept the rest back. He said that he borrowed 10 of the best flying artifacts from the shops of the 4 great clans, but in fact he spent a lot of money to make these 10 flying artifacts. Of course, when he said that he had spent a lot of money, he had used a lot of rare materials of his own, not a lot of spirit stones. Naturally, the cost of making it was completely free. The 4 great clans were too embarrassed to accept his money. However, they did obtain a lot of good materials during the making process. Long before the saber drawing assembly, he had a secret discussion with the head of the Jing clan, who specialized in making flying artifacts. Jing Feihong had agreed to help him make 10 flying artifacts that could carry 10,000 people at the same time, using the most secretive techniques from the Jing clan. Each artifact had to be able to carry at least 1,000 people. Even so, Yu Qianzhou's requirements were extremely strict. He wanted these 10 flying artifacts to not only have the best techniques, but also to be made of the most durable materials. Especially the outer shell, it had to be able to withstand an attack from an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. At the very least, it had to be able to withstand an attack from an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Jing Feihong was shocked to hear this. It was reasonable to use the most durable materials, but why did they need to make the shell so sturdy? Flying artifacts were used to carry people. Who would use a flying artifact to fight an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage? Jing Feihong thought about it, shook his head and smiled bitterly. He said, perhaps we can find some rare materials to make a small flying artifact. However, where can we find so many good materials to make 10 such large flying artifacts? Moreover, they have to be able to withstand an attack from an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. The Jing clan is really helpless. You don't have to worry about this. I will provide the materials. What do you think of using this to make them? Yu Qianzhou said as he secretly stuffed something into Jing Feihong's hands. Jing Feihong took a look at it and was instantly shocked. He said, nether iron. The Jing clan was good at making artifacts, so they were naturally better at identifying these things. They immediately recognized what it was. It was actually the world's rare nether iron. If you use nether iron to make them, they should be able to withstand an attack from an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, right? Yu Qianzhou asked this because he wasn't too sure. He had never fought with an expert in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage because he knew that the final stage and the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage were two completely different concepts. He had never dared to try fighting someone like that. Being beaten up was a small matter. At worst, he could just get back up after falling down. The important thing was that big boss you couldn't afford to lose face like that. Absolutely no problem unless the other party has some powerful artifact. Jing Feihong held the item in his hands and nodded as he looked at it. Then he asked suspiciously, even if we use nether iron to make them, the materials needed to make 10 ships are not something that can be easily obtained. Mister, how can you find so much nether iron? You don't have to worry about this. Just tell me how much you need. Yu Qianzhou patted his chest confidently. This. Jing Feihong thought for a while and said, the amount of nether iron needed to make 10 ships, based on the storage bags in 3 rooms, would be at least 8 bags. That much? Yu Qianzhou was shocked. Jing Feihong nodded and said, if we use all of them with nether iron and add on the other things that we need, 8 bags would barely be enough. If we only need to use some in the crucial areas, 1 bag would be enough. Forget it. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and gritted his teeth. You don't have to worry about the materials. I'll gather 10 bags for you as soon as possible. Use all of them with nether iron. They have to be sturdy and durable. Jing Feihong watched him leave, dumbfounded. He didn't know if he would really be able to get 10 bags of nether iron. Without another word, Yu Qianzhou returned to Utopia on the same day. Back when he was digging the tunnels in the Hades cave, he had collected quite a lot of nether iron. Putting them all together, there were barely 3 bags. Qin Feng had even cried and begged him to keep at least half of them. He said that once he figured out a way to refine nether iron, he would let the entire Utopia army use nether iron artifacts. Originally, Yu Qianzhou didn't want to keep them, but after hearing what Qin Feng said, he was tempted. He had no choice but to make another trip to the Hades cave. He spent close to a day digging out a large tumor in the intestine-like Hades cave before finally getting 10 bags. The next day, when he really handed the 10 bags of nether iron to Jing Feihong gulped hard. He couldn't believe that this was real. After coming back to his senses, he immediately promised, I'll definitely create those 10 artifacts as soon as possible. Yu Qianzhou recalled that Qin Feng had said that refining nether iron was very troublesome, so he asked Jing Feihong, it might be more troublesome to refine nether iron. Does your Jing family have a way? Mister, you don't have to worry about this. My Jing family relies on refining artifacts, so we naturally have a set of secret refining techniques that won't be leaked, Jing Feihong said confidently. Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up, and he immediately became interested. He asked, what secret technique? Can you give me a set of recipes so that I can broaden my horizons? This. Jing Feihong said hesitantly, this is the Jing family's foundation. The secret refining technique has always been kept by the Elders Guild. If you want to take it out, you have to get the Elders Guild's approval. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to take it out in a short period of time. Ha! Don't worry, I'm just asking casually, Yu Qianzhou said with a smile. In his heart, however, he was thinking that he would get it sooner or later, so he couldn't push them too hard. He had to wait for them to finish the 10 flying artifacts first. Just like that, Yu Qianqiu waited for news of the Jing family's flying artifacts. The day before yesterday, someone from the Jing family's shop came to say that the artifacts would be quietly delivered to the 100 Flowers Valley the next night. So the next day, after the masked loose cultivator received the spirit stones from Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Wuyuan, he delayed his departure to the next day. The reason was that Yu Qianqiu wanted to wait until he got the artifacts before he left. A flying artifact could carry 1,000 people, so it was more than enough to carry 600 people. But after all, it was the first test. For the sake of speed and safety, Yu Qianqiu decided to scatter the 600 people. First, the smaller the size of the flying artifact, the faster it could fly. Second, if there was an accident, they wouldn't be killed all at once. On the surface, they were masked loose cultivators, but in reality they were the 6 captains of the special forces. They threw the artifacts in their hands at the same time, and in the blink of an eye, 6 black flying artifacts with 2 sharp ends and round waists appeared in the sky. 2 pairs of legs stretched out from the bottom, and the 6 artifacts landed on the ground side by side. When the sun rose, it was supposed to be the time for everything to wake up and be full of life. But when these 6 enormous objects appeared, they immediately made everyone feel an inexplicable pressure. Their bodies were as black as ink with 2 sharp ends. It was hard to tell which side was the head and which was the tail. The smooth, streamlined design made people's hearts palpitate under the sun's touch. It made everyone feel like they were facing 6 monsters. Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Wuyuan looked at each other. They knew that this was a flying artifact, but they had never seen such a flying artifact before. It was a little strange. The Allure Beauty looked at Purple Dress and saw that she was also curious. Clearly she had never seen it before. The loose cultivators were also sizing them up. In the end, their gazes focused on the abdomen of a few flying artifacts. They saw that there were words and strange symbols like Utopia 001 engraved on them. Everyone knew the words Utopia at the front, but they had never seen the symbols at the back. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and his eyebrows twitched. He seemed to be a little proud. These artifacts had abandoned the flashy designs of dragons and beasts, and only chose a single streamlined design. It looked simple, but in fact, it was a combination of some of the design concepts he knew from his previous life. The streamlined design could reduce wind resistance, and only then could the flight speed be maximized. There was no point in having messy designs and engravings. The key was that it was practical. From Utopia 001 to Utopia 010, there were a total of 10 flying artifacts, and they were all named after Utopia. The one in front of him was 6 of them, and the remaining one was the one he had just put into his storage bag. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands together excitedly. He couldn't wait to try out the flying magic tool that had integrated the advanced concepts of his past life. In any case, he couldn't return to his past life, so he could only sit on this thing to reminisce. Chapter 417. Beside him, the temptress suddenly pulled him back. She glared at him and asked, "Are you really going to leave me here by myself?" "About that." Yu Qianshou chuckled. "You're not a loose cultivator and you didn't take any money either. Why do you have to join in the fun?" As he said that, he turned to the 2 team leaders and the 6 company commanders and said, "Follow me." The 8 of them followed Yu Qianshou towards a flying transcendent artifact. Ziyi's eyes brightened, and she followed without hesitation. The temptress was taken aback. Suddenly she giggled and said, "So what if I didn't take any money? I don't want it." She smiled coquettishly and followed after them. Yu Qianshou stomped his feet and turned around. He was speechless. He had never met such a thick-skinned woman before. He then led the group onto the flying transcendent artifact. Everyone looked around. The interior was decorated with many fluorescent stones for illumination. Although it was empty, the tiles were brand new. Clearly they were new. Yu Qianshou took out a jade archive and examined it. He then smiled and walked to one end. He stomped on a square beneath his feet, and immediately, they heard the buzzing sound of a spring turning from the bottom. Everyone's eyes suddenly lit up. The shields on their left, right, front, and top were retracted with a whoosh. 8 transparent crystal windows appeared before everyone's eyes, allowing them to see the scenery outside. Outside, Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Weiyun were startled by the movement of this strange object. Why did it suddenly grow eyes? They then saw Yu Qianshou and the others standing in front of the transparent crystal at the front of the cone, gesturing to the outside world. These 8 windows allow the user of the flying transcendent artifact to observe the situation outside. They don't have to be exposed to the elements outside. If something unexpected happens, they can close the windows at any time. Yu Qianshou pointed at the circle of transparent crystal windows as he introduced them. He then stomped on the square beneath his feet. Everyone's vision darkened, and the 8 windows were sealed again. She stepped on it again and the window opened again. While everyone was still in shock, Yu Qianshou stepped on the other squares under his feet. The sound of springs rang out, and a wide and thick seat rose up behind his buttocks. He sat down calmly and pointed at the platform in front of him that was filled with spirit stones. He smiled and said, "This is the place to replenish the spirit stones. The pilot can sit here and easily control the entire flying mystic instrument." Under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, Yu Qianshou stood up and put away all these things before entering the spacious cabin. Everyone looked in the direction of his finger and saw that on the cabin floor, there was a square every 2 meters. It was obvious that there was something special about it. Sure enough, Yu Qianshou walked to the side and stomped on it. Another thick chair rose up. He sat down and touched the small hand valve on the side of his body. The back of the chair could be adjusted very comfortably. Everyone was speechless as they watched. He then pulled down one of the hand valves on the cabin wall, and a small transparent window appeared before everyone's eyes. After Yu Qianshou closed it again, he stood up and said with a smile, "Those sitting on the side can observe the situation outside through this window." After demonstrating once, he quickly made 8 copies of the Jade Archive in his hand and handed them to the 2 team leaders and the 6 company commanders. He said, "I've done it once. You should understand the gist of it by now. Some of the control methods in here are more or less the same. Just take a look and you'll understand." As he spoke, he suddenly shouted in a deep voice, "Each of the 6 companies will have 1 flying transcendent artifact. The 2 team leaders will each be responsible for 3. Keep in touch with each other. Once we're airborne, immediately discuss and form a battle formation. The target is the coast of the Eastern Sea. Execute the order immediately." As soon as they received the order, the 8 of them immediately perked up and responded in unison, "Yes." Then they quickly exited the mysterious flying transcendent artifact. Ziyi and the temptress were so shocked that they felt like they were dreaming. They saw Yu Qianshou walk to the rear cabin with his hands behind his back and pull open a door. He then walked in while shaking his head. "Is there something new in there?" The 2 girls looked at each other and quickly followed him in. Inside the small space there was a large bed and a recliner. Yu Qianshou activated a mechanism, and a large protective shell suddenly appeared above his head, letting in the bright sunlight. Then they saw him leisurely leaning against the recliner, squinting his eyes as he basked in the sun. He looked very relaxed. "There's a bed and recliner on the flying transcendent artifact?" The 2 girls looked at the small space in a daze. Suddenly, the flying transcendent artifact shook. The temptress blinked her eyes and quickly walked to the transparent crystal window. The 6 flying transcendent artifacts, including this one, slowly rose into the air and adjusted their direction. Below them, Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Weiyuan had seen many things in their lives, but they had never seen such a strange flying transcendent artifact. They watched as the 6 flying transcendent artifacts formed a formation in the air, with 1 in the lead and 2 on each side. The one Yu Qianzhou was on was sandwiched in the middle of the formation, becoming the center point of the formation. The 6 flying transcendent artifacts adjusted their direction and quickly flew towards the east. They could vaguely see Yu Qianzhou lying on a recliner and waving at them through the transparent window at the rear of the flying transcendent artifact in the middle. This kid has finally grown up. This is going to be difficult. Dongfang Chang'ao shook his head and smiled bitterly. He turned to the people beside him and said, "They came prepared. The coast of the East Sea is going to be lively." Qiu Weiyuan said with a solemn face, "We have to quickly spread the news and let the sects prepare." The two of them looked at each other and quickly flew into the 100 Flowers Valley as Yi and the temptress were leaning against the transparent crystal window, chattering like 2 little girls. Their faces were filled with excitement, and they would occasionally point at the white clouds floating by outside as they chatted and laughed, as if they had never seen them before. Yu Qianzhou lazily turned over on the soft recliner and continued to sleep. The temptress turned around and looked, then walked over with a smile. She squeezed her butt onto the recliner and poked a certain someone's waist with her sharp index finger. Yu Qianzhou let out a cry and sat up. He rubbed his waist and glared at her angrily. He shouted, "Are you done yet? What do you want?" The temptress wasn't angry. She looked around and thought to herself, "Thank goodness I'm thick-skinned enough to come here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see such a flying instrument." Thinking of this, she winked at Yu Qianzhou seductively. Yu Qianzhou shuddered and immediately lost his temper. He wanted to move away from the temptress, but the temptress grabbed his hand and asked, "Let me ask you, was this flying instrument really made by the Jing clan of the 4 major clans? Are you trying to seduce me?" Yu Qianzhou struggled, but he couldn't get rid of the temptress. He smiled bitterly and said, "Palace leader Yi, if you have something to say, just say it. Don't pull me, okay?" Zi turned around and glanced at the two of them. She was already used to their actions. She turned around and pressed her face against the transparent window. Her eyes were pure as she looked at the clouds of different shapes that were being thrown far away. The allure beauty glanced at Zi and bit her alluring red lips with her silver teeth. She grabbed onto Yu Qianzhou and whispered in his ear, "Don't call me Palace Lord Yi in the future. My real name is Yi Kun. You can just call me Yi Kun." Her voice was like a devil's voice, very alluring. "Call me Yi Kun? What a mess." Yu Qianzhou's face twitched. He rejected the temptation and said, "Don't give me that. Don't you just want to know where this flying instrument came from?" The temptress retracted her hand, blinked her eyes, and said in a tone that seemed both real and fake, "You even saw through this?" "That's right. I just want to know. With such a comfortable structure, my pink sect will also buy one." Yu Qianzhou escaped from the temptress' hands. He turned around and sat on the bed. He waved his hand and said, "The Jing clan made it. You can buy it from them. I'm just afraid that you can't afford it." "How many spiritual stones do I need?" the temptress asked. "Once you figure out what this flying magic artifact is made of, you won't ask anymore." Yu Qianzhou sneered. The temptress didn't pester him anymore. She knocked around the cabin and thought about it. At the coast of the East Sea, in an uninhabited courtyard, people from different sects were sitting together again. After receiving the news from Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Weiyuan, they all looked at each other. A group of people wanted to poach Yu Qianzhou's people, but in the end they were cheated by Yu Qianzhou. Bai Shan of the 4 major families sneered. Didn't he know what kind of person Yu Qianzhou was? Every time he saw something good, he would want to take a bite. Now, not only did he not get anything, but he also broke his teeth. "We can't let that brat have it." Zhu Xianxian of the Daluo sect suddenly shouted with a dark face. The group of people all had mocking expressions on their faces. It seemed like this guy was the one who came up with the idea. If Yu Qianzhou found out about it, who knew who would be the one to blame? However, they believed that it couldn't be kept a secret. Everyone looked at Bai Shan, who was smiling coldly. With the relationship between the 4 major families and Yu Qianzhou, it was possible that Yu Qianzhou already knew about it. Maybe Yu Qianzhou had personally led his people here to settle the score with the Daluo sect. After all, no matter how arrogant Yu Qianzhou was, he wouldn't go against the entire Chinese cultivation world. It was very likely that he would go after the Daluo sect. Seeing that everyone was silent, Zhu Xianxian looked around and said, Does no one want to take back the spiritual stones that belong to your sect? Are we going to be cheated by him just like that? Yuan Jiokue of the Six Paths Demon Sect chuckled and said, How? Snatch it or trick it? Do you think that we can force him to hand it over by issuing a decree in the name of the Cultivation Alliance? Yuan Jiokue, you have a good idea. Zhu Xianxian's eyes lit up. He slapped his thigh and said loudly, We will issue a decree in the name of the Cultivation Alliance. Does he dare to go against the entire Cultivation Alliance? Yuan Jiokue rolled his eyes and sneered, Zhu Xianxian, don't talk nonsense. What do you mean my idea is good? If you want to do it, do it. Don't drag me into it. As he spoke, he stood up and said, The war is imminent. I advise everyone to make a decision carefully. Don't let the Cultivation Alliance cause trouble first. I can't make the decision on this matter. I'll have to ask the consecrators in the sect. I'll take my leave first. Goodbye. Only the people in charge of communication were present. The real experts were not present. Yuan Jiokue, your Six Paths Demon Sect is also a big sect. Is there a need to be so afraid of trouble? Zhu Xianxian's face sank. Yuan Jiokue, who was walking out, turned around and stared at Zhu Xianxian. He shook his head and said with a bitter smile, Zhu Xianxian, some things should be forgotten. There's no need to take it to heart. So, you guys continue the discussion. In short, the Six Paths Demon Sect will follow the final decision of the Cultivation Alliance. Then he turned around and said, I almost forgot. I have to quickly order the hidden sentries in the sect. There's nothing that kid doesn't dare to do. I hope he doesn't cause any accidents when he runs into him. The group of people watched him disappear outside the door. Bai Shan also stood up and cupped his hands at everyone. The four families are the same as the Six Paths Demon Sect. We will follow the final decision of the Cultivation Alliance. I have something to do. I'll take my leave first. With one or two people taking the lead, the other sects found excuses to leave. In the end, Zhu Xianxian was left alone with a gloomy expression. A good discussion had failed just like that. Leaving the two girls in the room, Yu Qianqiu opened the cabin door and walked out. He then closed it again. More than 100 people were sitting neatly in 2 rows in the cabin. When they heard the voice, they immediately stood up and saluted. Yu Qianqiu signaled everyone to sit down. He then asked the leader of the team, How's the flying artifact? Are you used to it? Very good. It's better than all the ones I've used before. The leader was a little excited. As the two were talking, the flying artifact suddenly slowed down. The two of them swayed. The leader suddenly turned around and shouted, Company leader, what's going on? Leader, someone stopped the flying artifact of the leader of the second team. The leader of the first team who was driving the artifact replied loudly. The leader flashed to the front and seemed to be communicating with the people of the second team. Yu Qianqiu walked over slowly with an expressionless face. Looking through the transparent window, he saw a dozen people in a small flying artifact blocking his way. He snorted coldly and said, Let's ask who stopped us first. The leader nodded and quickly got it through telepathy. He then reported, It's a patrol team formed by a few small sects of the Cultivation Alliance. They want us to show our pass token. Yu Qianqiu's expression softened a little. He nodded and said, I'm doing my job. I'll cooperate with them. The leader took the order, opened the cabin door and flew out. After showing the pass token, he negotiated with those people. Not only did those people not leave, but they also followed the leader. After the leader flashed in, he asked, They said they've heard of your name for a long time. They want to pay you a visit. After coming out of the special forces, there was a rule that the title leader could not be used outside. Let them in. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The leader went to the cabin door and let more than a dozen people in. As soon as these people from the small sects came in, they immediately saw more than 100 masked people staring at them. They suddenly felt a little uneasy and nervous. It was said that these people were all experts of the tribulation stage. This is the Mr. Yu you want to see. The leader waved his hand and said. Yu Qianqiu laughed and walked over. He smiled amiably and said, Everyone, you've worked hard. I'm Yu Qianqiu. I don't know what I can do for you. Although Yu Qianqiu's reputation was not very good, his history of struggle had long been something that the young disciples of the various sects talked about. Many grassroots disciples dreamed of becoming someone like Yu Qianqiu. When Yan Bugui brought people to challenge him, Yu Qianqiu killed his opponent with one strike. Although the young disciples of the various sects did not see it with their own eyes, it was spread like wildfire. Especially when he said, So what if I'm famous or not? One strike is enough. This made the grassroots disciples of the various sects worship him crazily. Coincidentally, these people were sent here to investigate suspicious cultivators. When they saw the 6 extraordinary flying artifacts, they thought it was someone from a large sect. They did not expect to meet a legendary grassroots idol. So one of them mustered up the courage to ask for a meeting with the leader. The leader wanted to refuse, but he remembered that Yu Qianqiu was here. It was not good for him to make a decision for him, so he came to ask for instructions. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu would agree without hesitation? The young disciples thought that Yu Qianqiu would be like those people from the large sects and just say a few perfunctory words to them. Who knew that he would be so easy to talk to? The group of disciples from the small sects immediately relaxed a lot. They all bowed and said, "I've heard of Mr.'s great name for a long time. We've come to pay our respects." "No need to be so polite. We're all friends. If you continue to be so polite, I won't be happy," Yu Qianqiu said, pretending to be angry. "Do you also think that I'm like the rumors outside, a scum or a madman in the cultivation world?" The dozen or so people were seen through by him. They all scratched their heads and smiled awkwardly. One of them mustered up the courage to reply, "To be honest, mister, we were indeed a little worried before. Now that we've met, mister, we know that those were all rumors." "Yes, I believe that what you said is the truth. Other than being a trustworthy person, I also like people who tell the truth the most." Yu Qianqiu patted his shoulder kindly and sighed. "But rumors are terrible. Maybe after many years, when your cultivation is successful, you will inevitably encounter similar rumors. I hope that you can treat it with a normal heart. Don't be like me. Sometimes, when I can't hold it in anymore, I get into a fight. It's clearly something I'm in the right, but the more I fight, the worse my reputation becomes. So, I'm a good example. I hope that you can learn from it. This is my advice to you as a person who has been through it." The group of people fell into deep thought when they heard this. The disciple who was patted on the shoulder was a little agitated. "From what I see, someone is clearly jealous of Mr., and that's why they purposely spread rumors to slander you. But so what? If I had Mr.'s ability, I definitely wouldn't forgive anyone who dares to talk about me like that. That's too shallow, too shallow." Yu Qianqiu shook his shoulder and warned him, "Don't learn from me. If that day comes, you must endure when you need to. You must know that if you take a step back, everything will be fine. If you endure for a while, everything will be fine. Don't be impulsive, understand?" Ziyi and the temptress, who were in the rear cabin, had already opened the cabin door to see what was going on. Now that they heard Yu Qianqiu's tireless and sincere words, the temptress's expression was indescribably strange. Seeing that the group of young cultivators were all silent, Yu Qianqiu patted the disciple's shoulder again and laughed. "It's fate that we can meet. Let's not talk about unhappy things. This is my new flying artifact. It's also unique in the cultivation world. Dongfang Chang'ao from Fuxin Island and Qiu Weiyuan from 10,000 Demons wanted to come up and have a look, but I coaxed them away. Why don't you all take some time to look around? Let me be the host." Hearing that such a famous person didn't even have the qualifications to come here, these people were indeed eager to try. However, after looking at each other, they all bowed to Yu Qianqiu. The disciple cupped his hands and said, "We appreciate Mr.'s kindness, but we have been ordered to come here. We don't dare to delay for too long, so we bid farewell to Mr. Since you all have important matters to attend to, I won't disturb you anymore." Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and turned to Team Leader 1. "We didn't prepare any greeting gifts. Let's give each of you 10 top-grade spirit stones." "No need, no need." The group of people quickly waved their hands. But Team Leader 1 didn't say anything. He resolutely carried out the order and stuffed a handful of spirit stones into everyone's hands. The group of people held the spirit stones and looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Yu Qianqiu smiled amiably and said, "Take it all. Take it as a greeting gift. Take it as a witness to our reunion." Hearing this, the group couldn't refuse and could only thank him. After they left, the 6 flying artifacts began to speed up. Yu Qianqiu was still waving at them from the cabin door. More than 10 people stood on the small flying artifacts and watched as Yu Qianqiu and the rest disappeared into the distance. They sighed as they looked at the spirit stones in their hands. With Yu Qianqiu's current status in the cultivation world, he didn't even pay attention to the sect masters of a sect. Yet he looked favorably upon these useless grassroots disciples. Furthermore, he patiently encouraged them with kind words and even gifted them with a large amount of spirit stones. The disciple who had close contact with Yu Qianqiu turned to look at the crowd and said, "All the sects say that Mr. Yu is a scum and a lunatic. I hope that the people who say these things can be as scum and as crazy as Mr. Yu. Then our cultivation world will be peaceful. Another person sighed. It's obvious that Mr. Yu is in the limelight. All the sects are obviously working together to suppress him. Similar things don't only happen in the cultivation world. We've seen such things in all the sections. Be careful with your words. We can only say these things here. Don't spread it back to the sect. Otherwise we'll be in trouble. What are you afraid of? Don't tell me someone will tell on us. Mr. Yu is a good person. A group of disciples who didn't know the truth were bored. They were chattering and vindicating Yu Qianqiu in a small area. It just so happened that the journey was lonely. He didn't expect to become a teacher who spread the truth again. Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood. He said to Team Leader 1, if we encounter similar checks again, invite all the young disciples from the various sects who have low cultivation bases. If they are that old, forget it. Those old and stubborn people have already set their minds. It's hard to change them. Don't waste my breath. Just deal with it. Understood. Team Leader 1 nodded. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to turn and leave, he suddenly thought of something and snorted. There is one exception. If you encounter people from Daluo sect, tell Team Leader 2 to first send people to cripple them. Then don't let any of them go. Capture them all. I want to give Daluo sect a greeting gift. After giving his instructions, Yu Qianqiu returned to the rear cabin with his hands behind his back. When he entered, he saw Ziyi looking at him strangely. The allure beauty covered her mouth and giggled. Mr. Yu is indeed a kind person. He's the model for all sects to learn from. I knew you were a bad woman. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at her. He said to Ziyi with a serious expression, some people's words cannot be trusted easily, especially those who speak ill of others behind their backs. Hearing this, the allure beauty laughed even more happily. She continued, especially those who speak nonsense and lie without blinking. You can't trust the words of these people. Mr. Yu, do you think I'm right? Chapter 418. A good man doesn't bicker with a woman. Yu Qianqiu threw down these words and confidently returned to his chair to rest. The allure beauty smiled and slowly retreated to the bed. She pulled over the thick blanket and curled up inside. She closed her eyes and looked satisfied, as if she had found what she had been looking for many years. The bed was big enough and Ziyi sat down cross-legged in a corner. Just as he calmed down, Yu Qianqiu, who was pretending to sleep, suddenly discovered that something was wrong with his dantian. He could not help but look inside himself and saw that his nascent soul had actually stopped breathing, and the red and black spheres revolving around it were speeding up. Moreover, it was getting faster and faster, stirring up the quintessential essence in his dantian. The quintessential essence was stirred up like a tornado, and as it spiraled, it seemed to show signs of becoming thicker. Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes and stood up. A thought popped into his head. Was he going to make a breakthrough again? The two women were also alerted by his movements. Seeing his dignified expression, they looked at each other. Just as the allure beauty was about to ask something, Yu Qianqiu said, Ziyi, protect me. My cultivation is about to break through to the middle stage of nascent soul. Don't let anyone disturb me. He sat down cross-legged on the deck and closed his eyes to carefully observe the movement in his dantian. Ziyi's expression became serious. She knew that when a cultivator was about to make a breakthrough, they couldn't be disturbed. If they missed this opportunity, it would be hard for them to make any more progress. She immediately moved to his side and looked around vigilantly. When her gaze swept past the allure beauty, she was actually on guard. After the allure beauty saw what the two were doing, she felt a bit sad. Yu Qianqiu subconsciously called Ziyi to protect him and didn't call her. It was obvious who the two women were in his heart. Especially Ziyi's vigilant gaze, it made her even more confused. It turned out that she hadn't really integrated with the two of them. Perhaps they were subconsciously on guard against her. I'll go guard outside the door in case someone comes in and disturbs you. The allure beauty smiled awkwardly. Purple Dress nodded solemnly. She was on high alert and even pulled the handbrake to have the protective shell cover the transparent window again. The 100 Charm beauty lightly sighed in her heart, and she smiled as she left. If I don't leave now, then I'm afraid I'll become Ziyi's main target. Is there a need for that? The movement in his dantian made Yu Qianqiu a little uneasy. The true essence in his dantian was stirred up into a tornado. He had never heard of such a phenomenon before. He also knew that his cultivation method was different from other cultivators. Therefore, he did not have any experience to learn from. However, there was one thing that was beyond doubt. Only when one's true essence became more substantial would it represent that one's cultivation would become more profound. Just like the protective aura released by a transcending tribulation stage expert, only when the true essence was thick to the point that the protective aura released would be hard to break. If it was at the soul formation stage, then the protective aura released would naturally be even more difficult. It was clear that at this moment, the true essence in his dantian was spinning rapidly. It was trying to reach the next level. However, it was like there was no place for it to borrow strength from. It spun in the air and like a bone scraper, it swept across the walls of his dantian. Yuchencho was in so much pain that he trembled. He clenched his teeth and endured it. That damned nascent soul was sitting peacefully between the red and black beads. There was no reaction at all. How could this be? Z was shocked. She was also a nascent soul stage cultivator. Although it was uncomfortable, it shouldn't be like this. Increasing the resistance and slowing down the speed should reduce the pain. Yuchencho was in so much pain that his whole body was covered in sweat. He bit his lips so hard that they bled. When he could no longer endure it, this thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Z saw that he had bitten his lips so hard that they bled. She trembled with fear, but she didn't know how to help him. She just stood there anxiously. Right now, she even wanted to go out and pull the Beauty of 100 Charms in to ask her if she knew what was going on. In her anxiousness, she suddenly saw a purple spirit stone appear in each of Yuchencho's hands. The spirit stone's luster gradually dimmed in his palms. The spiritual energy within it was obviously being absorbed. Z was slightly stunned. She had never used any spirit stones before, but it didn't mean that she didn't know what a purple spirit stone meant. He actually had the legendary top-grade spirit stone? Z forgot to be anxious. She watched in surprise as he threw away one spirit stone and took another. This big liar. Who knew how many more secrets he was hiding? The rich spiritual energy in the top-grade spirit stone poured into his dantian. Finally, the rotation of the true essence slowed down a little. His dantian became bulging. However, the two damn beads didn't slow down at all. They stirred the true essence in the thick spiritual energy. The beads' rotation speed, the resistance of the spiritual energy, and the limited pressure of the dantian. Under these three forces, the true essence was quickly compressed and gradually became thick. It really worked. Yuchencho was overjoyed. However, once the true essence was compressed, there was more space left, and the resistance of compression was smaller. It was difficult to continue to compress it further. Without hesitation, Yuchencho absorbed the spiritual energy again. He endured the swelling pain of his dantian and sucked crazily. He desperately increased the pressure of the true essence. When the true essence was compressed a little thicker, he poured spiritual energy into his dantian to fill it, until the water-like true essence turned into a substance like silk cloth. It was milky white and delicate, and its volume shrank by 100 times. Suddenly, the nascent soul that had stopped breathing suddenly spat out a big bubble, as if it had choked on water in a river. What it spat out was nothing else but a mass of milky white true essence. It merged with the milky white that had been compressed just now. It was as if this thing was blocking his airways, causing him to be unable to breathe. As such, the dual jewels protecting his body had to lend him a helping hand, causing his entire dantian to become restless, and now he was finally able to breathe. In an instant, the whole dantian quieted down. The two beads' rotation speed returned to their usual state of protecting the nascent soul. The nascent soul that could breathe took a deep breath. The rich spiritual energy was sucked in. It rotated in its abdomen and spat out a silk-like white true essence. Yuchencho's whole body shook. He let out a weak moan in comfort. A smile appeared on his face. He finally broke through. Zi also let out a sigh of relief. She also saw that he had broken through. As soon as Yuchencho opened his eyes, he saw Ziyi's suspicious face coming over. He was startled and said, "What are you doing? Are you trying to molest me?" Ziyi pointed at the light purple spirit stone in his hand that had not finished absorbing the spiritual energy. She asked, "Do you really have no money? I heard that this top-grade spirit stone is very valuable." Yuchencho looked down. Although he had already absorbed enough spiritual energy, he still forcefully absorbed the remaining spiritual energy. The spirit stone in his hand immediately became a dead gray. No one could tell that it was a top-grade spirit stone. Then he swept all the dried-up spirit stones on the ground into his storage pouch, got up and patted his butt. "Of course I'm short of money. Don't look down on me because I have a few top-quality spirit stones in my hands. They were given to me by my master to use when I cultivate and advance. I can't just throw away the things that my master told me. Do I have to show off to everyone?" This top-grade spirit stone was given to me by my master. My master has a top-grade spirit stone. If such a good thing were to be known, what do you think the consequences would be? Ziyi frowned and nodded solemnly. She said, "It's very likely that someone with ulterior motives will target you. You're really smart. Not bad. This is why I don't let others see it. I'm worried about others, but I don't need to be on guard against you," Yu Qianqiu said. He put his mouth next to Ziyi's ear and whispered, "That's why I asked you to protect me. I didn't ask her to. Do you know why now?" Ziyi heard this and nodded as if nothing had happened. In fact, her face was full of joy and she could not hide it even if she wanted to. When one's cultivation was breaking through, it was best for the most trusted person to be the protector. Choosing her. It turned out that Yu Qianqiu trusted her more. Yu Qianqiu took the opportunity to breathe in the faint fragrance of a virgin. He smacked his lips and found that it was slightly painful. Only then did he realize that he had bitten his lips. Thus he let out a puddle of water. Under Ziyi's careful guidance, he washed the blood on his mouth. The allure beauty leaned on the outside and looked at the more than 100 people. There was no joy or sorrow on her face. She was lost in her thoughts. The cabin door suddenly opened. Ziyi poked her head out and smiled. The 100 Charms beauty was startled. She turned around and went in, only to see Yu Qianqiu standing there with his legs crossed. The protective shell on top of his head had been opened again, and the sky outside was already filled with stars. "You broke through?" The allure beauty walked to Yu Qianqiu and asked with a smile. There was a bitterness hidden in her smile. It seemed that this question was a bit unnecessary. If he did not break through, it would be strange if he could be so carefree. Yu Qianqiu smiled proudly and answered her in this way. The allure beauty did not ask any more questions. She still had a seductive smile on her face. She casually returned to the bed and continued to curl up in the thick blanket. She suddenly felt that she should have a good sleep. Perhaps her mood would be better tomorrow. The stars in the night sky were so brilliant. They were so deep, beautiful, and enchanting. However, they did not make her open her eyes for a while. She, who had been meditating and resting for many years, actually fell asleep quietly. The next day, the 6 flying artifacts in the sky were the first to bear the light of the rising sun. Lying on the chair, Yu Qianqiu still felt that it was dazzling with his eyes closed. He tilted his head to look. Ziyi was meditating at the corner of the bed. Her expression was solemn. The blue velvet blanket on the side was half wrapped around a beautiful body. The red muslin had been rolled up at some point, and 2 extremely seductive jade legs were quietly resting on the blanket. The half-rolled-up blue velvet hooked onto the 2 jade legs, making the 2 thighs appear even more white and creamy. The worst thing was that a certain person did not know how to restrain himself when he slept. Although he was wearing underwear, he did not know how to cover his private parts. I have sinned, I have sinned. Sex is emptiness, emptiness is sex." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He could only recite the Sex Sutra 10 times in his heart. He turned his head and forced himself to face the dazzling sunlight. He shouted in his heart, "Eyesight! Blind my eyes with that stab." Chapter 419. The 6 flying artifacts sped across the sky and did not stop at all, but there were exceptions. Team 2 followed Yu Qianqiu's instructions and invited all the young disciples who were being interrogated by the Cultivation Alliance to Utopia No. 1 to accept Yu Qianqiu's ideological reform. However, Yu Qianqiu had a bad reputation and some disciples were really afraid. They did not want to go, but they could not stand the other party's warm invitation. After meeting Yu Qianqiu, they were instantly touched by Yu Qianqiu's spring breeze-like warmth. After receiving the greeting gifts, they regretted listening to the rumors. In Yu Qianqiu's words, this was called moving with emotion and understanding with reason. Of course, that was a greeting gift. The sects set up many similar interrogation points everywhere, and then set up a communication matrix within a certain range. Naturally, this was to make it convenient for them to report to the Cultivation Alliance in time if they discovered anything suspicious. Therefore, the Cultivation Alliance received the news that Yu Qianqiu's 6 flying artifacts were closing in. The interrogation points asked, "Did Yu Qianqiu and the others cooperate with the interrogation? Did they cause any trouble?" What surprised the various sects was that the replies from many of the interrogations all said, Yu Qianqiu actively cooperated with the interrogations. His attitude was very good, and there were no signs of him causing trouble at all. Accidents were accidents, but not causing trouble was a good thing. The sects that had participated in the poaching sighed in relief. Daluo sect had instructed their disciples to be on guard. If they encountered Yu Qianzhou and his attitude was not good, they must tolerate it as much as they could, lest Yu Qianzhou take the opportunity to cause trouble. But after receiving such news, Zhu Xianxian was relieved. It seemed that Yu Qianzhou did not dare to go against the entire Cultivation Alliance. At least he knew what was good for him. When the Daluo sect disciples received the warning from the sect, they were all terrified. Everyone knew that Yu Qianzhou had a deep grudge with the Daluo sect. They had clashed with each other again and again. Even the sect master's son was killed by that bastard. What else could he not do? It was said that he had brought more than 600 cultivators at the crossing calamity stage with him. What should he do? Zhao Chang was an early-stage tribulation-passing elder of the Daluo sect. He was usually by the side of Luo Kuan, one of the top experts of the Daluo sect. Now that he had been sent to a checkpoint of the Daluo sect, it was truly a waste of his talents. In this battle, Luo Kuan and several experts in the late tribulation passing stage had come to help the Daluo sect. He could be considered the number one figure among the people from the Daluo sect. After receiving Zhu Xianxian's report about Yu Qianzhou, Luo Kuan ordered his men to calculate Yu Qianzhou's route and sent his trusted aide, Zhao Chang, to the place where Yu Qianzhou must pass. The purpose was simple. Put aside the past and try to restrain the disciples from clashing with Yu Qianzhou at this time. Otherwise they would become a laughing stock to the other sections. Now was not the time to settle the score. Zhao Chang had been with Luo Kuan for a long time. In the Daluo sect, no one dared to disrespect him. After a long time he inevitably became a little arrogant. In his heart he also felt that he had been wronged. He had been sent to a small checkpoint to deal with a rogue. Although he was unwilling, he did not dare to object to Luo Kuan's arrangement. In the Sea of Clouds, the Daluo sect's flying artifact was hidden. This way it was convenient for them to observe the surroundings. On the flying artifact there were 15 people including Zhao Chang. A leader named Lu Su looked at the arrogant Zhao Chang and asked carefully, "Elder Zhao, why does that Yu Qianzhou always make life difficult for our Daluo sect?" Zhao Chang glared at him and snorted. "You Daluo sect disciples should remember this. Kind people get bullied and tame horses get ridden. Our Daluo sect is ranked second among the righteous sects, so you must show the backbone of a great sect. Don't be like some people who can remain indifferent even when their own sons are killed after suffering a bit. Boosting the morale of others while lowering our own prestige is a great humiliation to the Daluo sect." Lu Su clicked his tongue. He had long heard that this elder Zhao was arrogant, but he didn't think he would dare say such things to that person. He naturally knew who Zhao Chang's son was killed, but the topic was too sensitive. He didn't dare continue. If word got out, an early core formation realm disciple like him wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Thinking of this, Lu Su couldn't help but worry. As soon as he received the news from the sect, he was prepared to avoid Yu Qianzhou's flying artifact and hide in the clouds. No matter how much Yu Qianzhou hated the Daluo sect, he couldn't possibly search for them everywhere. Who knew that the front lines would send this guy to restrain them? From his tone, it sounded like he was here to restrain them. He was clearly pushing them into a pit of fire. So, just hide in the Daluo sect and act arrogantly. Why didn't you think about what kind of person Yu Qianzhou was? He didn't care what sect you were from. Even sect master Luo Qingtian, a mid-tribulation passing cultivator, lost an arm in a one-on-one duel. Why did you, an early tribulation passing cultivator, come looking for trouble? Lu Su turned around and exchanged a glance with the people behind him. He could see that everyone had a hint of worry on their faces, and it was clear that they all had the same concerns as him. Lu Su couldn't help but shake his head with a wry smile. He hoped that Elder Zhao didn't want to lose face in front of the disciples and deliberately said something like that. What he feared had come. In the distance, the sound of several flying artifacts piercing through the air could be heard. With a little effort they could tell that there were 6 flying artifacts, which matched the number of flying artifacts Yu Qianzhou had brought. The expressions of the dozen or so people changed drastically. After looking at each other they all looked at Elder Zhao. Zhao Chang snorted slightly and steered his flying artifact into the clouds to look into the distance. In the distance, 6 black dots were flying in their direction at high speed and would soon meet them. Zhao Chang directly controlled the flying Dharma artifact to rush out and tyrannically blocked the path of the 6 flying Dharma artifacts. The 6 flying artifacts had clearly noticed them as well and slowed down as they approached. The group from the exalted sect sized up the 6 celestial artifacts in front of them. They were oddly shaped, and even under the bright sun, they exuded an eerie aura. They even had eyes at the front, and through those transparent eyes, they could vaguely see people sitting inside. The Daluo sect is here on orders from the Cultivation Alliance to interrogate suspicious cultivators. If you have a pass, hand over your pass. If you don't, open your cabin and accept the interrogation. Zhao Chang clearly wanted to show off his strength to Yu Qianzhou and the others. When he roared, even the disciples behind him felt as though their ears were about to explode. The Daluo sect disciples held their breaths and watched the other party's movements. After Zhao Chang's shout, the 3 flying artifacts in the triangular formation at the front suddenly moved. It was as if the eyes had suddenly closed. The group did not understand what was going on. Zhao Chang snorted coldly and shouted again, "The Daluo sect is here on orders from the Cultivation Alliance. How dare you?" The tone of the shout suddenly changed. The group of people were also startled by the other party's movements. They saw the 3 flying artifacts in front of them shooting over in a frenzy, directly colliding with the small flying artifacts beneath their feet. They did not even say a word to each other. "Oh my God!" The Daluo sect disciples cried out and jumped down from their flying artifacts. After they dodged the impact, they released their flying swords and steadied themselves in the air. Looking up, they saw that Zhao Chang was clearly trying to dodge with his flying artifact. However, it happened so suddenly, and the 3 monstrous things had deliberately planned for this. There was a loud bang in the air. Zhao Chang leaped into the air and flew away. The flying artifact under his feet was knocked far away, and he quickly rolled toward the dear earth to hug it. The group of disciples still had lingering fear, and a bad feeling welled up in their hearts. At first, everything was fine, but when they heard that it was the Daluo sect, they immediately became impolite. They clearly did not like the Daluo sect. "How dare you? How dare you defy the decree of the Cultivation Alliance?" Zhao Chang shouted, and a cold light flashed from his storage bag. Under his guidance, it first shot into the sky, then quickly turned around and shot toward one of the flying artifacts. Bang! There was a loud bang and the flying sword hit its target smoothly. Zhao Chang recalled his flying sword and was slightly taken aback. Under his full strength, the other party's flying artifact was actually undamaged. Even the scratch was not very obvious, almost unnoticeable. "Oh my! What material is this flying artifact made of?" The expressions of the Daluo sect disciples below all changed. They saw that Zhao Chang's sword seemed to have poked a hornet's nest. Dozens of black shadows flashed out from the flying artifact that was hit. More than a dozen of them shot into the sky and surrounded Zhao Chang from all directions. The rest of them scattered. The disciples' vision blurred, and they found that each of them was standing in front of a masked man in black, staring at them indifferently. The words "itinerant cultivator" on the men's chests made the disciples subconsciously shiver. They immediately remembered the news they had heard recently. Yen Bugue led a group of tribulation stage experts to sneak attack the 100 Flowers Valley. Yu Qianzhou suddenly attacked, and the 600 itinerant cultivators under him killed almost all of the tribulation stage experts without suffering any losses. Zhao Chang looked around in the sky and saw that he was surrounded by masked men in black, and they were all at the early stage of the tribulation stage, similar to his cultivation level. He immediately waved his hand and shouted, "How dare you! I am a disciple of Daluo sect's Honorable Luo Kuan. You itinerant cultivators dare to surround me? Are you tired of living?" "Who is Luo Kuan?" A strange question came from below. Zhao Chang looked down and saw a man and 2 women standing on one of the flying artifacts. The man was asking an enchanting woman a question. The enchanting woman giggled and said, "Luo Kuan is the honorable cultivator of Daluo sect in the late stage of the tribulation stage. It is said that he is ranked 3rd in the Daluo sect. He is the leader of the Daluo sect's expedition to the East Sea." "Then I'll have to ask him why his Daluo sect keeps looking for trouble with me." The man nodded slightly. Zhao Chang shouted, "Who is down there? Come up and answer me." Even at this time, the man's tone was still so unyielding. As expected of a big sect. Where did this old bastard come from? He really doesn't know his place. After the man cursed, he waved his hand and pointed. "Cut that stubborn guy into a human stick, seal his dantian and bring him here. Don't kill him. This is my greeting gift to the Daluo sect." Chapter 420. If you remove his limbs, you'll be called a human stick. The Daluo sect members were shocked to hear this. Seeing him call out to these wandering cultivators, they could vaguely guess who he was. "You're Yu Qianzhou." Zhao Chang's eyes widened in anger. The
How could
Deluo
he
sect
hesitate when he
disciples
heard
watched
the
as
other
the
party's
masked man
words?
moved his hand
Before
around
the
Zhao
wandering
Chang's mouth.
cultivators could make
Then
a
the
move,
masked man
he
pulled out
released
something
his
bright
stellar
red and
energy
threw
to
it away.
protect himself.
Zhao Chang's
His
neck
sword
went limp and
created
he
a
fainted.
huge sword
The
shadow with all
disciples
his
trembled
might,
in fear
and he
as they looked
slashed
at
out
the masked
wildly,
man in front
forcing
of
the
them.
masked wandering
Purple-dressed
cultivators
turned her
in
head
front of him
slightly
to
to the
retreat,
side, as
it
if she
seemed that
couldn't
he was
accept
not
something
afraid
that was
or
too
he
cruel.
would not have to run for
The
his
allured
life.
beauty's pupils
But with
shrank
so many
slightly.
people here,
Yu
and with his
Qianqiu
stellar
looked
energy
coldly at
slowing
the
him
Deluo
down,
sect
where
disciples
could he
around
run?
him and said
He had
indifferently,
just run a few
"You're
dozen
just small
meters when a
fries
group
in
of
the
flying
Deluo
swords
sect.
attacked him,
I shouldn't
hitting
have
his
bothered
stellar
with you.
energy with a
If you want to
bang-bang.
blame someone,
He was
blame
knocked
yourself
upside
for
down in
being
the air.
Deluo sect
A dozen or
disciples and
so
getting
black
involved in
shadows
the grudge
flashed and
between me and the
immediately
Deluo
trapped him
sect.
again.
You
You
can't
can't
blame
blame
some
others
people
for
called
this.
back their flying swords
He
and
waved
raised
his
them
hand
together,
lightly and said,
creating a huge
crippled their
sword shadow that
cultivation,
struck
but
Zhao
spared their
Chang's stellar
lives.
energy from
The
all
dozen
directions.
or so Deluo
With
sect
a loud
disciples
bang, the
immediately
protective
turned
aura
pale with
shield
fright.
instantly
They
disappeared.
had cultivated so
Zhao
hard,
Chang,
who
who
would
was
be willing
inside,
to be a mere
was also
mortal.
shocked until
Once
he was
their
dizzy.
cultivation was crippled,
His face was
it would be
pale
a fate
and blood
worse than
oozed
death.
from his nostrils.
Now they probably
His
couldn't
eyes
do
were
it anymore.
dazzled, but
There
he
was
knew
no
that
need for
survival
any
was the most
discussion.
important thing
The
at this
dozen or
time.
so disciples
He
held
wanted
on
to
to
raise
their
his
last
sword to
glimmer of
protect
hope
himself,
and fled
but
frantically.
he found that his arms
However,
were
the
light.
difference in their
When he came
cultivation
back to
was
his
too
senses,
great.
in the blink of an eye,
Zhao
the
Chang
masked
let out
man
a
caught
scream
up
of
to
horror.
them. Cries
He didn't
of
know
pain
when his
rang out
arms
in
and
the air
legs
as
had
their
been
dantian
separated
was
from his
destroyed.
body. No
From
wonder
then
they were
on,
so light.
they would no longer
Yu
be able to
Qianqiu.
gather true yuan to
Zhao Chang
cultivate.
howled in grief.
The group of
but a black
disciples who
shadow
were as limp
flashed
as
by
sheep
and
were
struck his
thrown into
abdomen
them
with
flying
flying
artifacts. His
The
body
6
shook,
black
and
figures
he
moved
immediately
again and
felt his
sped
dainty
east,
unlocked,
at the shore of the
unable
eastern
to circulate
sea,
his
in the empty
spiritual
backyard
origin.
of a large
His
residence.
whole body
A
quickly withered,
communication
and he
array
quickly
was set
fell
up.
from the sky.
4 elders
The people
wearing the
below
Deluo
grabbed his
sect's
belt and
uniform
quickly
frowned.
patted the roots
The
of
one
his severed
standing at the
limbs,
front was
stopping
Luo
the
Kun,
gushing blood.
and the 3 behind
Yu
him were
Qianqiu,
also
you'll
consecrators
die a
of the
horrible
Deluo
death.
sect.
They were called
Chang
Hui Zhao
Wen,
Li Mingbai, and
Not
Zhu
far
Zhao.
away, Lu Su
Luo
sighed
Kun
slightly.
said to one of the
He was
disciples
really
in
used
a
to being
spirit-stone
flattered in the
array,
Deluo sect.
still no contact.
He was so arrogant
The
that he
disciple
didn't even know
replied
who
with
he
some
was.
fear,
I've
"He only
already
regretted
asked
it
the
when he
disciples
suffered
of
a
the other
loss.
sects nearby
He-
to help me search.
I'd like to see who will
They
die
really
a horrible
haven't found
death."
any disciples from our
come on.
sect. Break his
It's
teeth and
already
pull
been
out
a
his
day.
tongue.
It's impossible for
Qianqiu
Zhao
sneered with
Chang
his
and the
hands
others to
behind his
not
back.
contact this place
This
for
was
so
the
long.
first time he had
Something must
encountered
have
such a
happened.
reckless person.
As Luo Kun
If he
spoke,
did not treat
he
him
turned
well,
to look at the
he would
three
be letting
elders
down the
behind
grand
him.
immortal
The
sect's
three of them
efforts in
nodded
nurturing
slightly,
him.
clearly agreeing
Yu
with
Qianqiu,
him.
don't you
Zhu
dare.
Xianxian,
As
who
soon
was
as
standing
Zhao
to the
Chang
side,
said that,
bowed
the masked man
respectfully
lifted
to the
him
4
up high and
elders and
punched
said,
him in the mouth.
"For
The
consecrators
sound
in
of
this
his teeth
disciple's
cracking was
opinion,
hair-raising.
there shouldn't be any accidents under normal circumstances.
If there really is an accident, I'm afraid that Yu Qianqiu will have something to do with it. If we calculate the time we lost contact with them, it should be around the same time as Yu Qianqiu." Luo Kun nodded slightly, then asked the other 3 consecrators, "What do you think?" "Zhu Xianxian, I want to ask you something," Li Mingbai, the youngest of the 4 consecrators, said as he looked into the sky. "Consecrator, please ask." "This disciple will tell you everything he knows," Zhu Xianxian said respectfully. Li Mingbai slowly retracted his gaze and stared at him, saying, "You've interacted with Yu Qianqiu the most, so you should know him well. If something really happened to Zhao Chang at the hands of Yu Qianqiu, I want to ask you, why does Yu Qianqiu keep targeting our Deluo sect? This person is narrow-minded, and he's a notorious scoundrel in the cultivation world. Ever since he became enemies with our Deluo sect, he's been harboring a grudge against us. If we don't get rid of this person and allow him to continue developing, he'll become a scourge to our sect sooner or later," Zhu Xianxian said in one breath. Li Mingbai nodded noncommittally and said, "I heard that the Cultivation Alliance's idea to divide up the 600 cultivators under Yu Qianqiu was your idea." Zhu Xianxian suddenly realized that the consecrator's tone was a little off. He paused and said, "Yes, this disciple believes that we can't let them grow any further and should disband them as soon as possible. That's why I came up with this idea. All the other sects think the same way." Li Mingbai nodded and asked again, "Then why did I hear that Yu Qianqiu didn't provoke our Deluo sect back in the 100 Flowers Valley, but you always went against Yu Qianqiu?" "This disciple did not go against Yu Qianqiu. I only fought for the interests of our sect. This is my duty," Zhu Xianxian said with some fear. Zhu Zhao, who was standing to the side, took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "As the head of our sect's external affairs, you should fight for the interests of our sect. This is the right thing to do. Remember this in the future." His words affirmed Zhu Xianxian's contribution. "Yes, this disciple will remember," Zhu Xianxian said sincerely. Zhu Zhao was his uncle. If it weren't for this uncle, he wouldn't have been able to become the external manager of the Deluo sect. Zhu Zhao's words were clearly helping him out of this predicament. Li Mingbai glanced at the uncle and nephew, then exchanged glances with the other 2 consecrators and said nothing more. Looking at the time, Yu Qianqiu and the others should have arrived by now.
Whether or not Yu Qianqiu and Zhao Chang's disappearance was caused by him, we can ask him. After saying that, Zhu Zhao turned to Zhu Xianxian and asked, have there been any movements from Limitless Island recently? There hasn't been any big movement, but there are still reinforcements coming from time to time. Zhu Xianxian hesitated for a moment, then said, there has been something strange recently. Corpses are constantly floating over from Wuxia Island. After the various sects have fished them up and examined them, they have all dug pits and buried them. In the past few days, there have probably been more than 10,000 corpses. The four of them looked at each other. Zhu Zhao frowned and said, can you tell where they came from? Are they mortals or cultivators? They are all wearing Huaxia's clothing. Most of them are mortals, but those cultivators are the disciples of the various sects who were kidnapped in the previous battles. The main meridians of those mortals were severed. Clearly they died from having their blood drained. As for those cultivators, they are even stranger. Holes have been dug out of their dantian, as if someone had taken away their core or nascent soul. This is really puzzling. Zhu Xianxian shook his head and said, something like this actually happened? Those people don't even let mortals go. What are they trying to do? Luo Kuan said angrily. As they were talking, the sound of several flying artifacts piercing through the air came from afar. In the blink of an eye, 6 of them flew past the courtyard. Zhu Xianxian looked at the sky and said, it should be Yu Qianqiu and the others. That's good. Zhu Zhao sneered at them and said, let's go take a look at what this Yu Qianqiu looks like, the one who made our Daluo sect lose face. We can also ask him if what happened to Zhao Chang has anything to do with him. The few Daluo sect consecrators nodded in tacit agreement and walked outside together. Clearly they all wanted to get to know this Yu Qianqiu. Zhu Xianxian, who was following behind them, sneered. Since the 4 consecrators are personally coming, let's see where this Yu Qianqiu can run to now. Although the sect's defensive line was long, the main force was gathered in this Wanghai town. Due to the prominent terrain, it was suitable for observing the enemy. In addition, the mortals who lived here had been forcibly moved away, so it naturally became the first choice for the sects to stay. There was a large open space in the town. Originally, it was a place where the fishermen who fished by the sea gathered to dry and repair their nets. Now it had become a good place for the sects to gather manpower. At this moment, many people from the sects slowly walked out. Seeing the 6 strange flying artifacts land in the sky, everyone knew that Yu Qianqiu had arrived. Aside from wanting to see Yu Qianqiu, the 600 wandering cultivators were also the focus of everyone's attention. After all, many sects had paid a large amount of spirit stones for them. If they were really worth fighting for, many sects would not give up so easily. The leading flying artifacts hatch opened, and Yu Qianqiu slowly walked out with a dark expression. Behind him were the beauty of 100 charms and purple dress. The other flying artifacts did not move, and the 600 wandering cultivators did not come down either. Something was strange. More and more people gathered around. Yu Qianqiu looked around with a dark expression and sneered. He turned around and shouted, throw those Daluo sect guys out.
Chapter 421. The various sects glanced at each other, then turned their gazes to the Daluo sect's side, a trace of doubt in their eyes. Could there be people from the Daluo sect on these 6 flying artifacts? The Daluo sect's representatives looked as if they had expected this. The disappearance of Zhao Chang and the others was indeed related to Yu Qianqiu. As long as they were still alive, everything was fine. However, they were afraid that Yu Qianqiu would destroy the evidence after killing them and refuse to admit to it. If that happened, even if they could find out the truth, it would take a lot of effort. Zhu Xianxian sneered. If the people who came out were really Zhao Chang and the others, then today's matter would be settled. With the 4 great reverends of the Daluo sect here, they would not let Yu Qianqiu get away scot-free again. As soon as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, 15 masked men in black flashed out from the cabin door behind him. Each of them had a person in their hands and they threw them forward, causing them to cry out in pain. Everyone looked over and saw that these people were indeed wearing the uniform of the Daluo sect, and each of them was struggling weakly on the ground. One of them was covered in blood, and the most frightening thing was that all 4 of his limbs had been chopped off. At this moment he was facing the Daluo sect's direction with his mouth wide open, howling in pain. From the look of grief and indignation on his face, it was clear that he had nowhere to vent his endless hatred. None of the people present were ordinary people, and their eyesight was far stronger than that of mortals. After a closer look, they were all shocked. The one who had lost all 4 limbs was actually Zhao Chang, a disciple of Reverend Luo Kuan of the Daluo sect. As for the other disciples, their cultivations had been crippled. Everyone was shocked. This Yu Qianqiu was too bold. After leaving people in such a state, he didn't even know to kill them, instead throwing them out in front of everyone. It seemed like their previous guess was correct. Yu Qianqiu must have known that the Daluo sect had come up with the idea to poach his people, and now he was here to take revenge. What a lunatic. Everyone from the Daluo sect paled. Zhu Xianxian even cried out in alarm, "Elder Zhao," and rushed over in a flash. The 15 black-clothed men did not need to be told, they all flashed in front of Yu Qianqiu, blocking Zhu Xianxian. Zhu Xianxian was well informed, so he naturally knew how powerful these masked men were. He stopped in his tracks and pointed at Yu Qianqiu, shouting, "Yu Qianqiu, how dare you treat my Daluo sect's disciple like this?" At this point, there was no need for the Daluo sect's people to call out to them. All of them quickly rushed over and soon over 1,000 of them had arrived. Without saying a word, the 15 masked men released flying swords from their storage pouches and held them in their hands as they faced off against the 1,000 exalted sect disciples without the slightest fear. Zhu Xianxian turned around and saw so many Daluo sect disciples backing him up. His courage was boosted and he jabbed his finger at Zhu Xianxian again. "Yu Qianqiu, today is the day you die. All of you back off." At Yu Qianqiu's order, the 15 black-clothed men dragged the dozen or so Daluo sect disciples on the ground and quickly moved behind him. Yu Qianqiu's cold gaze swept across the Daluo sect, and he slowly took a few steps forward. Then he stepped on Zhao Chang, who was struggling and howling so hard that he could barely move. "How dare you!" The Daluo sect's revered elders shouted in unison. Yu Qianqiu's actions were no different from slapping the Daluo sect's face in public. Zhu Xianxian's body moved. He wanted to go over and save Yu Qianqiu, but he saw Yu Qianqiu take out 2 big black sabers from his storage pouch. Zhu Xianxian jumped in fright. He forcefully stabilized himself and didn't rush over. "You want to fight?" Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow. The 2 sabers in his hands clashed, and the sound of metal clapping resounded through the air. It was neither wood nor metal, and no one could tell what rare material the sabers were made of. With the clapping of the sabers, the cabin doors of the flying magic artifacts all opened. Everyone's eyes widened, and more than 600 masked loose cultivators came out in an instant. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and glanced at them. It seemed that he had found the feeling of being the boss in his previous life, calling on his subordinates to fight. He had worked hard for so long and this was the day he had been waiting for. He turned back to the Daluo sect and sneered, "I'll play with you if you want to use force, but I still want to make things clear. Besides being a trustworthy person, I'm also a reasonable person." The various sects looked at the strength of both sides in shock. The Daluo sect had almost double the number of masked loose cultivators. There were nearly 100 tribulation stage cultivators and 4 peak experts in the final stage. On the other hand, on Yu Qianqiu's side, more than 600 cultivators were all in the tribulation stage. The purple-clothed girl was also in the final stage. It was said that she had killed an expert of the same cultivation level in the 100 Flowers Valley. She could probably fight against 2 of them. The strength of both sides was completely on par. Seeing this, the various sects could not help but feel a little emotional. This guy had really grown. He had the strength to fight against the second largest sect of the Orthodox sections. Of course, this was only a portion of the Deluo sect's strength. It would be a joke if they thought that they could fight against the entire Deluo sect with just 600 people. How could a large sect that had stood in the cultivation world for thousands of years be shaken by a mere 600 tribulation stage cultivators? However, what the various sects did not know was that these 600 people were also a portion of Yu Qianzhou's strength. Utopia's army of nearly 10,000 was already preparing for battle. Once the time was ripe, Yu Qianzhou would probably attack the Deluo sect first. One was a powerful force that was out in the open, while the other was a huge army of cultivators hiding in the dark. Sooner or later there would be a day when they would clash fiercely. Who would win and who would lose? Luo Kun walked over slowly and pushed Zhu Xianxian behind him. After glancing at the grotesque Zhao Chang on the ground, he stared coldly at Yu Qianzhou and spat out 2 words. Release him. His attitude was very firm and his meaning was very clear. I don't care if you want to fight or reason with me. Release him unconditionally first or the consequences will be dire. The other 3 worshippers also walked over with ashen faces and stood beside Luo Kun. When Zhu Zhao brushed past Zhu Xianxian, he also glared at him coldly. Clearly he was blaming Zhu Zhao for weakening the prestige of the Deluo sect. Zhu Xianxian felt that he was wronged and lowered his head slightly. He thought to himself, don't you know the power of those 2 sabers? They have already defeated several tribulation stage cultivators. Moreover, if I charge forward, Yu Qianzhou will definitely kill me. I'm afraid that I won't be able to return even if I charge forward. Regardless of Zhu Xianxian's attitude, when the 4 Deluo sect experts in the late tribulation stage appeared, their imposing manner immediately silenced the crowd. The atmosphere was very heavy. No one from the various sects came out to mediate. Yu Qianzhou had gone too far, and even the supporting Immortal Island was too embarrassed to step in. This had completely damaged the Deluo sect's reputation, and no one would be able to stop him. Seeing the 4 people appear, Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes slightly. He stabbed his sabers into the ground and cupped his fists. May I know who the 4 of you are from the Deluo sect? Release him. Luo Kun spat out these 2 words in reply. His tone sounded like it was the final warning. The allure beauty behind Yu Qianzhou transmitted her voice. This person is Zhao Chang's master, Luo Kun, a worshipper of the Deluo sect. The other 3 are also worshippers of the Deluo sect. They are all experts in the late tribulation stage. Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly and said expressionlessly, so it's the 4 worshippers of the Deluo sect. I apologize for my lack of manners. The 4 of them immediately knew that someone had transmitted a message to Yu Qianzhou. Their gazes all fell on the 100 Charms beauty. Zhu Zhao shouted, 100 Charms beauty, your demon illusion palace has already been erased from the cultivation world. Why don't you behave yourself? Are you going to get involved in this matter? The allure beauty smiled non-committally and immediately maintained her silence. Not speaking at this time meant that she was reserving some leeway. Perhaps it would be more advantageous for Yu Qianzhou to act when the opportunity arose. Zi, Yu Qianzhou called out. Zi also understood the seriousness of the situation. She immediately teleported to his side and used her actions to show that she was in the late tribulation stage. The 4 people's pupils shrank slightly as they stared at her. Facing someone who could kill an expert in the late tribulation stage, no one dared to underestimate her. It seems that the 4 seniors of the Deluo sect want to teach us a lesson. I'll leave the 4 seniors to you. You just need to hold them off for a while and I'll deal with the others. At that time I'll lend you a hand. No problem, right? Yu Qianzhou said indifferently. Yes. Zi nodded heavily. She glanced at the 4 people and took out the purplish-black bamboo. There was an uncontrollable excitement on her face. The various sects sucked in a breath of cold air. It seemed that this madman was going to clash head-on with the Daluo sect. At a time like this, when they were facing off against a foreign enemy, such a large-scale battle would be a loss for the Chinese cultivation world regardless of who won. Quan Deming of Fuxian Island finally couldn't help but shout, everyone think of the big picture. If there's anything we can talk it over. Since it has come to this, there's nothing to talk about. Zhu Zhao waved his hand at Quan Deming and shouted, Yu Qianzhou die. His figure flashed and he struck out with his palm. A huge palm shadow came crashing down. Zi, who was standing at the side, rushed forward and shouted, fight. The purple bamboo in her hand also turned into a huge shadow. With a bang, the shadow of the palm shadow was destroyed. A strong airflow spread out. Damn it. It's that bullsh *Tita Luo mountain splitting palm again. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. He thought that by showing off his strength, the other party would have some misgivings. Then he would be able to talk his way out of this. Who knew that the other party wouldn't just let this matter rest and would rather make it bigger? Since that's the case, what else is there to say? I'm not afraid. Without another word, Yu Qianqiu dragged his saber with both hands and directly split Zhao Chang, who was under his feet, into two. Then he pointed his saber forward and shouted, "Kill!" With Yu Qianqiu as an example, the dozen disciples of the Deluo sect were instantly killed on the spot. More than 600 masked men quickly divided into small combat teams and neatly charged into the enemy's group. Luo Kuan and the other two were also shocked. They didn't expect Zhu Zhao to attack just like that. He didn't even greet the three of them. But since the enemy had already launched a large-scale attack, they naturally had to protect their own side first. The three of them quickly exchanged glances and immediately shot up into the sky, rushing into the group of 600 masked loose cultivators. 6 palms flashed and flashed as fast as shadows. Like a gust of wind, the three of them consecutively killed more than 10 people. The dozen screams made Yu Qianqiu's heart skip a beat. He didn't think much of Zi and the late-stage tribulation passing expert, but he didn't expect the late-stage tribulation passing expert to be so terrifying. Killing early-stage tribulation passing experts was as easy as taking something out of one's pocket. Watching the dozen members fall from the sky and die, he immediately shouted, "Don't bother with the three of them. The others are your targets." As soon as these words came out, a few more people fell from the sky. But after hearing this warning, the special forces immediately stopped risking their lives to fight the three. Instead, they pounced into the group of Deluo sect disciples and started a frenzied massacre. Screams rang out everywhere as the Deluo sect disciples fiercely counterattacked. However, as soon as the battle started, the Deluo sect disciples realized that their side had more than 1,000 people, but they didn't seem to have more than 600 people on their side. It seemed as if they were surrounded by masked men in black, and they were being attacked from all directions. Just as they tried to deal with them, a flying sword suddenly pierced through their chest, and they fell to the ground with a look of disbelief on their faces. And when they attacked, the enemy seemed to have people helping them everywhere, so they didn't have to worry about their rear being exposed. As soon as they attacked, someone would immediately deflect their flying sword, and then they would be attacked for no reason. Up in the sky, Luo Kuan and the other two glanced at the scene below and immediately felt their hearts skip a beat. Although the masked men in black could not withstand a single blow from them, they were like hungry wolves charging into a flock of sheep when they charged into the Deluo sect disciples. The Deluo sect disciples had no way of fighting back against the flawless teamwork of the other party. The masked man in black constantly changed the most advantageous formation. His attacks and defenses were balanced as he slaughtered the Deluo sect disciples wantonly, killing them one by one. In an instant, 200 to 300 of the nearly 1,000 Deluo sect disciples fell, and the rest fell into a state of panic and fear. Faced with such a sharp combination of attacks, they were unable to organize an effective attack, and in an instant blood and flesh flew everywhere. The various sects were dumbfounded, and they looked at each other. They didn't expect the 600 people under Yu Qianqiu to be so powerful. Why did it seem as if every one of them had been through hundreds of battles? In this exchange, the Deluo sect suffered great losses. Both sides of the massacre were from the Cultivation Alliance. The various sects were worried, but they couldn't help either side. Luo Kuan and the other two were stunned for a moment, and another 200 Deluo sect disciples fell. In just a short period of time, almost half of the disciples had lost their lives. How could this be? The three's expressions changed, and without hesitation, they took out their flying swords from their storage bags. Luo Kuan shouted, "You two deal with those loose cultivators, I'll eliminate them." Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai quickly flashed to the sky above the battlefield. The flying swords hovering in the air were as fast as lightning, rising and falling towards the masked men in black below. Luo Kuan, on the other hand, glared at Yu Qianqiu. The latter was slightly shocked and thought to himself, so the so-called elimination was referring to me. Finish the battle quickly. Kill the opponent and help our brothers get rid of the other two, shouted Yu Qianqiu as he glanced at the Special Forces offensive. With the addition of 2 experts in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage, not only did the Special Forces suffer more casualties, but their attacking formation was also in chaos. If this continued, the entire team would be wiped out. Zhu Zhao was already in a difficult situation,
and Yu Qianzhou's shout was simply asking for his life. Ziyi immediately unleashed the great art of teleportation to the extreme. The purple bamboo she controlled flickered in and out of sight, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. No matter how hard Zhu Zhao tried, he couldn't get rid of the opponent. It was as if he was possessed by a ghost, and he could only barely defend himself. He felt like his life was hanging by a thread. He anxiously shouted, "Luo Kuan, quickly come and help me." Luo Kuan was about to kill Yu Qianzhou, but when he heard Ziyi's shout, he was immediately shocked. To the sect, losing one expert in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage was a great loss. How could they not save him? He immediately teleported over and fought Ziyi with Zhu Zhao's dual swords. Hold on. Yu Qianzhou roared. He turned his head and stared at the two experts in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage who were trying to kill the members of the special forces. A ruthless and cruel aura appeared on his face. He threw the broadswords in his hands into his storage bag, and with a flick of his sleeves, black shadows started to appear. The green flying swords that he used to use were now abandoned, and were replaced by black flying swords. Chapter 422. When Yan Bugui brought people to the 100 Flowers Valley to challenge, many people had seen Yu Qianzhou's thousands of green flying swords. They were quite powerful. The strange whip that everyone was helpless against was defeated by his flying swords. Yan Qing, who was in the middle stage of tribulation passing, was even killed by his flying swords. Now, a black flying sword had appeared. Since he could use it in this battle, it must be even more powerful. Currently, the situation of the battle had been turned around by the four experts in the late stage of tribulation passing. Once Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai used their flying swords, the 600 masked rogue cultivators immediately suffered heavy losses. As the leader, Yu Qianzhou couldn't wait any longer. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, thousands of flying swords covered the sky and covered the earth as they wrapped around him and directly pounced towards Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai. All the sects were shocked. This guy actually wanted to fight against two experts in the late stage of tribulation passing alone. He was a complete lunatic. The people of the supporting Immortal Island had an inseparable affection for Yu Qianzhou. When they saw this scene, they all shook their heads and remained silent. Osihai even sighed. The good seedling that he had taken a fancy to was probably going to die here. No one thought that Yu Qianzhou could survive the attacks of two experts in the late stage of tribulation passing. Bai Shan of the four clans turned around and sent a telepathic message. The disciples of the four clans quickly gathered and were ready to help as soon as the order was given. Seeing this, all the sects cursed inwardly. The four clans were probably going to help Yu Qianzhou. Hua Rui and Hua Yingyue of the Moon clan looked at each other and nodded slightly. Their attention was not on Yu Qianzhou, but on the two people in purple in the sky. The smile on the Allure Beauty's face disappeared. She raised her hand and stroked her hair. A few experts in the tribulation passing from the pink cult also took a step forward and waited for the order. "I'm coming," Yu Qianzhou roared. The flying swords swirled like snow as he waved his hand. With a flick of his finger, the flying swords pledged their loyalty to him. Hundreds of streaks of black light split into two groups and charged towards Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan at lightning speed. Yu Qianzhou was throwing caution to the wind. It was impossible for him to let the first batch of brothers who followed him into battle be annihilated. Now that his cultivation had just broken through to the middle stage of nascent soul, his ability to control his flying sword had once again increased. He had to fight with his life on the line. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai had already noticed his movements. Seeing the flying swords flying towards them like rain, they instantly covered their bodies with protective stellar energy. The two of them were confident that with their cultivation, they could completely block Yu Qianzhou's attack. However, the two of them weren't completely at the mercy of the other party's attacks. One of them controlled the flying swords below to slaughter the masked rogue cultivators while the other struck out with a palm. The Daluo mountain-splitting palm of the Daluo sect instantly conjured two giant palm silhouettes to meet the two waves of sword rain. The flying sword was like a sharp arrow, and the palm shadow was like a bubble. When the two met, it was like a knife cutting through tofu. The palm energy was immediately broken by the flying sword. As expected, it could break through the stellar energy of a late-stage tribulation stage cultivator. Yu Qianzhou was invigorated and his confidence was greatly boosted. He then controlled the flying sword to rapidly shoot towards the two Daluo sect consecrators. The hundreds of black flying swords that were protecting him also carried him as he charged towards them. "Oh no, there's something strange about these swords," Cui Zhaofan cried out involuntarily.
They can break through stellar energy. Let's go. Li Mengbai's expression changed. The two of them shouted at the same time. In order not to affect their speed, they instantly retracted their stellar energy and soared into the sky. The two flying swords that had caused the masked rogue cultivators to suffer greatly also immediately flashed into the sky, chasing after their masters. Without the threat of the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators, the masked rogue cultivators had suffered heavy casualties, and there were only about 400 of them left. However, their long battle experience in Utopia was very effective. They calmly and quickly formed a team to counterattack the Daluo sect. Yu Qianqiu pounced towards the spot where the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators had been standing. He looked down and saw that the number of casualties had reached a third. He instantly felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. These were all his efforts over the years. He couldn't help but roar crazily, "Kill! Kill! Kill! Don't leave a single one alive. Kill them all. You two old bastards, where do you think you're going? Give me your lives." Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately turned bloodshot. He pointed at the two people flying into the sky and shouted. Then, thousands of black flying swords carried him into the sky and chased after the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators. The smell of desperation was very strong. When the masked rogue cultivators below saw that their leader had single-handedly defeated the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators, they were instantly energized. They immediately followed their leader's orders to kill them all and started a frenzied massacre. There was no lack of intention to take revenge for their teammates. The various sects were shocked. Yu Qianqiu had actually scared away the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators from the Daluo sect? Now he was flying into the sky alone to continue his pursuit. He was really crazy. Oh my. After this battle, if Yu Qianqiu was still alive, even if he didn't have the cultivation of a late-stage tribulation stage cultivator, he would definitely be ranked among them. Not because of anything else but because of his strength. After the people of supporting Immortal Island recovered from their shock, they looked at each other and shook their heads with bitter smiles. Now they understood that supporting Immortal Island had abandoned a disciple with the potential to reach the late-stage tribulation stage. Moreover, he had killed two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators while he was only at the nascent soul stage. Although it was hard to believe, it was the truth. Supporting Immortal Island had suffered a heavy loss. Yu Qianqiu had used the improved Guiyuan sword art to establish his might in the cultivation world several times. Could it be that the tens of thousands of cultivators of supporting Immortal Island were inferior to Yu Qianqiu? The research and improvement of the Guiyuan sword art could not be delayed. The higher-ups of supporting Immortal Island nodded firmly. Bai Shan and the others from the four major clans were also surprised, but they weren't too surprised. The disciple of the world's #1 expert was not someone to be trifled with. Everyone finally heaved a sigh of relief. The Allure Beauty looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was holding a sword and chasing after Yu Qianqiu, and her eyes lit up. She didn't expect such a scene to occur. This guy was really unfathomable and always exceeded her expectations. It seemed that her worries were unnecessary. Ziyi had no problem fighting Zhu Zhao alone. She believed that it wouldn't take long for her to succeed. However, Luo Kuan's participation immediately made Zhu Zhao feel better. It was also impossible for the two of them to defeat Ziyi. Putting aside the fact that Nongzhu had trained her daughter, Nongzhu's famous form displacement transposition technique in the cultivation world was not something that could be practiced for fun. Ziyi and Luo Kuan had a headache because Ziyi didn't fight them head-on. Relying on her strange body movement technique, she appeared and disappeared unpredictably. The two of them could only guard against her, and it was difficult for them to fight back effectively. Ziyi was originally worried about Yu Qianqiu's safety. At this time, when she saw Yu Qianqiu, a nascent soul stage cultivator, chasing after two cultivators at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage, she was shocked and attributed all the credit to Bai Changchun. She admired Bai Changchun more and more. She thought that the disciple taught by Senior Bai was really extraordinary. Without any worries for the time being, Ziyi was immediately stimulated by Yu Qianqiu to the point that it was as if she had been injected with chicken blood. She used the great art of displacement transposition perfectly, immediately forcing Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao into an indescribably miserable state. The two of them had their backs against each other, and only then did they have one side of their defense reduced. Only then did they feel a little more relaxed. However, when they saw that Yu Qianqiu was also fighting 1 against 2, the two of them didn't know what to say. Zhu Zhao was so regretful that his intestines turned green. In order to stand up for his disappointing nephew, he had dragged the entire Deluo sect down with him. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai stopped high in the sky. With their cultivations, Yu Qianqiu naturally couldn't catch up. However, as the two of them were the highest echelons of the Deluo sect, they couldn't do that. If they really did that, the Deluo sect would be too ashamed to show their faces in public. Seeing that the two of them had stopped running and were preparing for battle, Yu Qianqiu also calmed down. He slowed down his speed and quickly set up his formation. Half of the flying swords were inserted outwards, densely distributed around his body, making him look like a hedgehog. He wasn't afraid of anything now, but he was afraid that the two cultivators at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage could use teleportation to ambush him. This ability to come and go without a trace was too terrifying. However, teleportation could only be used if there was space for them to move. Without the spatial crack that they used to teleport over, no matter how they tried to teleport, they would only be able to stop outside of his sword formation. After setting up his formation, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt more at ease. As long as he had a bit of buffer time, escaping would not be a problem. He immediately shouted, "Hand over your life." Yu Qianqiu commanded the remaining hundreds of flying swords to charge at the two of them. This guy kept asking the two of them to hand over their lives. The cultivators below were not deaf. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai's faces turned ashen. They were probably angry out of humiliation. Cui Zhaofan stared at the pursuing Yu Qianqiu and sneered, "You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. If you want to die, don't blame me for being impolite." With a point of his finger, the flying sword that was floating beside him moved according to his heart's desire. It spun in the air and suddenly created an illusionary shadow of a sword intent. The entire sword seemed to have expanded by a dozen times. With a whoosh, it pierced through the air. Its strong momentum caused visible ripples to form in the air as it charged straight at Yu Qianqiu. His attack when he was enraged was indeed extraordinary. Oh my! The final stage of the crossing calamity stage is indeed the final stage of the crossing calamity stage. Black fire flying sword, I will be relying on you to gain face. Don't let me down. Yu Qianqiu made up his mind and pointed his finger at the sky as well. He shouted, "Kill." 100 black rays flashed out and twisted into a flood dragon that soared into the sky. It wanted to compete with the heavens. It soared into the sky and faced the huge flying sword that was creating a huge ripple. The various sects below raised their heads and squinted their eyes to watch. They were speechless. It was hard to tell if Cui Zhaofan's profound cultivation had the upper hand or if Yu Qianqiu's black flying sword was sharper. Li Mingbai looked over with a solemn expression. It was really strange that the flying sword could break through stellar qi. If there was an accident, he did not mind being the laughingstock of two cultivators at the end of the tribulation passing stage fighting against a nascent soul cultivator. The Deluo sect disciples below had almost all died. Only the tribulation passing stage cultivators were barely holding on. It seemed like they would not be able to hold on for much longer. None of the four of them could bear the crime of being completely wiped out. Moreover, Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao were also barely holding on. He raised his hand and the flying sword beside him landed in his hand. He then clenched it tightly. As soon as the gigantic flying sword collided with the dense black sword shadows, the dense black shadows immediately disappeared into the gigantic sword, making an ear-piercing "si" sound. Cui Zhaofan, who was mentally connected to his flying sword, had a change of expression. The huge sword was instantly shattered. It could no longer withstand such a huge force. With a loud bang, it exploded into pieces in the air. Chapter 423. The black netherworld fire that even old man Bai could not break through was indeed extraordinary. It destroyed the flying swords of the late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators. Yu Qianqiu was very pleased. He immediately charged up while facing the flying swords. His aura was very arrogant. Li Mingbai snorted coldly. She waved her sword and a sharp light shot out. She then quickly slashed out more than 10 times. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu, who was rushing up, was instantly shocked. He realized that he was a little too excited. He only dreamed of defeating the late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators, but he might lose his life if he was not careful. He moved his sword horizontally, controlling hundreds of flying swords to meet the other's sharp sword light. The black flame flying swords were indeed powerful. Piu, they instantly destroyed more than 10 sharp sword lights. Yu Qianqiu's heart was beating rapidly. Just as he heaved a sigh of relief, he suddenly realized that Li Mingbai had disappeared from above. He saw a shadow appear from the corner of his eyes. The word teleportation immediately appeared in his mind. He was shocked again and hurriedly flew up on his sword. Running? Li Mingbai snorted coldly and shouted, "Stop him. Don't let him escape." Cui Zhaofan's expression darkened. He summoned another sword. The sword from before could be considered a transcendent artifact, but it was destroyed just like that. Although he could not control so many flying swords at the same time like Yu Qianqiu, he could still take out a few spare flying swords from his storage pouch. With the previous lesson he had learned his lesson. He no longer used his flying swords to fight against Yu Qianqiu. Just like Li Mingbai, he shot out a sword light every time he attacked. The two of them, one above the other, shot out a sword light while the other shot out a sword light. Immediately Yu Qianqiu was forced into a corner. The two of them watched as he used his flying swords to surround himself like a porcupine. Such a strange arrangement. If it wasn't to guard against the two's teleportation, what else could it be? Since he had the confidence to use these flying swords to defend himself, there must be a reason. The two of them did not force their way through, but the sword lights they shot out became more and more frequent. If this continued, there would come a time when Yu Qianqiu would fail to block it. Of course, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't just sit there and wait to be beaten. He had plenty of flying swords anyway, and it was enough for each person to use a dozen or so to harass them. However, the speed of his flying swords couldn't keep up with the speed of the two people moving through the air. It was true that he could only harass them, but he couldn't cause any damage to them. Just like that, the three of them began to drag it out. You release sword light to harass me, I release flying swords to harass you. However, at this rate, with Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, he might not be able to last as long as the two of them. However, Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan were feeling extremely anxious. There weren't many De Luo sect disciples left. If this were to continue, all of them would die. If Yu Qianqiu's subordinates were to kill all of them, they would be too ashamed to return to the De Luo sect. However, this Yu Qianqiu was like a porcupine, making it impossible for them to exert any force. No matter how high their cultivation was, they had to find a way to attack. Attacking with flying swords was impossible. The other party had as many flying swords as there were hairs on a cow, and all of them were terrifyingly sharp. They could cut through transcendent artifacts like vegetables, and even their astral energy and sword light could be disintegrated. Teleportation was also impossible to get close to, so there was no way to find an effective way to attack. It was hard to imagine how a single person could have so many sharp flying swords on him. It was simply illogical. The various sects below watched as the De Luo sect disciples were almost completely wiped out. The few dozen mid-stage tribulation transcendence disciples were clenching their teeth and holding on, but under the combined attacks of the other party, they didn't dare to go all out. However, they had gained some experience. Against this group of masked rogue cultivators, the only thing they could do was to stick together and defend. If they tried to retaliate too much, the other party would immediately take advantage of them. Below them, there were many people with low cultivation and very few people with high cultivation. The various sects looked up and saw that the situation was completely reversed. There were many people with high cultivation and very few people with low cultivation. Two late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators took turns to trap Yu Qianqiu and attacked fiercely, but they couldn't do anything to him. Alright. On the other side, Zi was even better. She was fighting with fewer people against more people. One late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivator was actually trapping two late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators, and Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao could only defend themselves. What made the various sects the most speechless was that Yu Qianqiu was obviously only at the nascent soul stage. He even needed to step on a sword to fly. Yet he was fighting with two late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators. This completely overturned everyone's perception. However, everyone could see that it wasn't that Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai weren't Yu Qianqiu's opponents. It was all because the black flying swords were too powerful, and the two of them were afraid to attack. If Yu Qianqiu dared to abandon the black flying swords, either one of them would be able to kill him with a single slap. How could they let him jump around in the sky for so long? It was time-consuming and embarrassing. Keep an eye on him. I'll go deal with the rogue cultivators below, Li Mingbai said to Cui Zhaofan. She felt that there was no need to waste the two of them here. Even if there was only one of them, they wouldn't be able to do anything to each other. It would be a waste for her to waste time here. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he was shocked. If that guy went down, no one in the special forces would be able to resist him. If they fought head-on, none of them would be a match for a late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivator. He immediately shouted, "Nebula Water Art." He casually came up with a frightening name. As expected, it caused the two of them to be shocked at the same time. They instantly thought that this guy seemed to have two special skills that he hadn't used yet. They immediately became vigilant. Neither of them left. The Nebula Fire Art was a famous name that the entire cultivation world had heard of. It was said that no one had been able to gain an advantage over that fire art. When Luo Qingtian returned to the Luo sect after he was injured, he once told the higher-ups of the Luo sect that Yu Qianzhou's fire art was extremely overbearing. Once he came into contact with it, he wouldn't be able to withstand it even if he hid within his protective qi. He was forced to self-destruct his protective qi to escape. As for the Nebula Water Art, this was the first time they had heard of it. However, it was an indisputable fact that Yu Qianzhou could indeed control water to fight. Even though he had only used it once, many people had witnessed it with their own eyes. Moreover, the only time it was used was when the Daluo sect master Luo Qingtian tried it. Luo Qingtian tasted Yu Qianzhou's water and fire secret arts alone, and no one knew if it was a blessing or a curse. Now that the Nebula Water Art had suddenly appeared, not only did it cause Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan to become vigilant, even the various sects below them became interested. Everyone knew that the duel between Yu Qianzhou and Luo Qingtian was on the river that day, so it was needless to say that there was water. Could it be that the water conjuration art could appear out of thin air like the fire conjuration art? Everyone subconsciously looked at the vast sea not far away. Yu Qianzhou stuffed 2 big handfuls of qi replenishing pills into his mouth and chewed them like candy. In the end, the sects waited for a long time, but they didn't find anything unusual. The people above them were still hammering away, hitting each other. They couldn't hit each other, and neither could they hit each other. However, 2 more screams came from below. 2 Daluo sect disciples had made a mistake, and the masked loose cultivator took advantage of the gap and killed them on the spot. Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan's expressions changed at the same time. The latter said to the former in a low voice, "This guy is stalling for time. You go down there, leave this to me." Li Mingbai fiercely slashed out a sword ray. Just as she was about to go down, she suddenly realized that something was wrong with her surroundings. It was slightly hazy, and the air instantly became abnormally moist. The 2 of them said at the same time, "Nebula Water Art?" The moment these words came out, it immediately attracted the attention of the various sects below. Instantly, their eyes widened like eggs, and their heads tilted up and down for a long time. However, they couldn't find a single drop of water. Are our eyes playing tricks on us, or are those 2 guys hallucinating? The various sects looked at each other, and all shook their heads to indicate that they didn't see anything. Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan's nerves tensed up for a long time. They realized that the surrounding air was indeed moist, but there was no water. The 2 of them simultaneously stared at Yu Qianzhou, only to see that this guy had a serious expression on his face. He was completely focused on dealing with the sword rays that the 2 of them had released. The 2 of them immediately felt like they had been tricked. Cui Zhaofan gritted his teeth and said, "Go. A mere water art won't be able to do anything to me. Yu Qianzhou, wait for me to kill all of them down there, then I'll deal with." Li Mingbai's words came to an abrupt halt. Yu Qianzhou clenched his fists, and immediately, a few water dragons coiled around his arms, swimming around in the air. Yu Qianzhou also knew that he could only drag things out for a while but not forever. It was time to give it his all. Old Man Bai had once said that if one used it well, they would be invincible. He then shouted, "Then I'll let you see my Nebula Water Art." With a shake of his arms, boundless water surged out, and the air instantly became bright. Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan realized that they were instantly trapped in the water, and the water was desperately trying to enter their orifices. The 2 of them were shocked and immediately released their stellar energy to protect their bodies. The various sects below were in an uproar. A large area of water had really appeared out of nowhere, covering a radius of a few hundred meters. Everyone had originally thought that he was going to borrow the water of the Eastern Sea. Yu Qianzhou was in the water and immediately realized the beauty of this technique. It was as if the radius of a few hundred meters was under his control. Even if he closed his eyes, he would be able to clearly see the actions of his 2 opponents. It seemed like the benefits of having a higher cultivation level were not small. This was wonderful. Yu Qianzhou chuckled, and the surrounding water quickly became turbulent. Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan immediately realized that they could not see the movements around them at all. They instantly felt that something was wrong and quickly released their divine senses. The moment the 2 of them released their divine senses, they immediately felt as if they were being pierced by a group of things. The feedback was not a piercing pain, but an unforgettable burning pain. The pain penetrated into their souls, and no matter how high their cultivation levels were, they could not help but let out a miserable howl.
The people below were also unable to see the movements above them because of the turbulence of the water. Suddenly they heard two miserable howls, and immediately determined that it was Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai. Everyone was shocked. Could it be that Yu Qianzhou had already succeeded? Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao clenched their teeth and defended with all their might. When they suddenly heard these two miserable howls, they immediately felt their limbs go numb. The two of them could naturally tell whose voice it was. For a cultivator at the final stage of the tribulation to let out such a miserable howl, the result was unimaginable. Immediately the two of them relaxed their defense. Hearing this, Ziyi became even more excited, and took the opportunity to attack ferociously. Zhu Zhao was careless for a moment, and the bamboo immediately pierced a hole through his thigh. Just as blood spurted out, he circulated his energy to stop it. Zhu Zhao was really stubborn. He was afraid that he would affect Luo Kuan, so he forcefully endured and did not make a sound. Instead, he became even more alert and defended with all his might. Outsiders might not know what was going on over at Yu Qianzhou's side, but he knew that Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai's divine senses had already been severely injured by his black flame-flying swords. This time it was not like the time when he fought with Luo Qingtian, where he only used a finger of black flame to lightly touch them. Instead, hundreds of flying swords rushed into their divine senses and messed them up. It was definitely enough to make them suffer. Seizing the opportunity, hundreds of flying swords shot towards the two of them. However, since Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai could cultivate to the final stage of the tribulation, they were not to be trifled with. How could they hesitate after suffering such an attack? Almost at the same time, they instinctively exploded their protective auras. Boom boom. Two loud sounds rang out like thunder. The water clouds within a radius of a few hundred meters in the sky exploded. Yu Qianzhou immediately felt dizzy from such a loud sound. The water clouds lost control and all turned into flowing water, splashing into the sea. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and regained his senses. His ears were still ringing, but he immediately realized that the two of them were staring at him like tigers watching their prey. He was immediately shocked and quickly summoned back the black flame-flying swords to protect himself. However, what surprised him was that the two of them were staring at him with pale faces, but they did not make any movements. Yu Qianzhou's face was filled with suspicion, but he did not dare to act rashly. He did not know what the two of them were up to. Moreover, his ears were still ringing, so it was better for him to slow down. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai, on the other hand, were suffering in silence. Their divine senses had been severely damaged. Other than their natal primordial spirits, the divine senses that could be released had already been destroyed by Yu Qianzhou. The remaining divine senses were pitifully little, and they had almost become idiots due to the damage to their divine senses. Now, the two of them were extremely mentally exhausted, and they were almost in a state of drowsiness. How could they still have the energy to continue wasting time with Yu Qianzhou? This symptom made the two of them recall what Luo Qingtian had said. Back when he was fighting with Yu Qianzhou, his divine sense was suddenly injured. Although the injury wasn't serious, that kind of heart-wrenching pain was simply unforgettable. It almost made people want to die instantly. Now that he thought about it, the symptoms were exactly the same as what Luo Qingtian had said. It was just that the degree of damage to their divine senses was much more severe than Luo Qingtian's. The three of them continued wasting time in the air. Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan took the opportunity to rest, hoping to recover some of the damaged divine senses. Yu Qianzhou, on the other hand, was used to scheming against others. He was suspicious and afraid that others would scheme against him, so he decided to observe first. He did not want to act rashly. Because of his suspicious nature, he had lost a great opportunity for nothing. The spectators below were puzzled. The battle had already reached this stage, so what was there to hesitate about? They were not going to persuade him anymore. Just end the battle quickly and end it quickly. What was the point of continuing to waste time? At this moment, a few disciples ran over from the small town. They quickly went to the spectator sects and reported something to the people in charge. The expressions of the people in charge of the righteous paths Fuxin Island, Moon Clan, Sword Clan, and Heartless Palace all changed. They looked at Yu Qianzhou, Li Mengbai, and the others who were in a stalemate in the air. The people of the four sects exchanged glances and nodded. They shouted in unison, "Stop!" As soon as they shouted, more than 10 experts in the final stage of the tribulation realm shot out from the four sects and blocked between Yu Qianzhou and the other two. Yu Qianzhou quickly looked around and squinted his eyes. He said in an extremely cold tone, "What? Could it be that the righteous path is colluding to deal with me?"
Chapter 424. The movement of the righteous immediately alerted the demonic sections. Although they were all in the Cultivation Alliance, there was still a division between righteous and demonic sections. It was best if they didn't suffer any losses. There was no need to say anything. The demonic sects exchanged glances, and a dozen late-stage tribulation passing experts soared into the sky. The righteous sects, including Daluo sect, had 5 sections. The demonic sects also had 5 sections. They stood in the sky. Nyosin of 10,000 demons said expressionlessly, "The matter of Yu Qianshou and Daluo sect has troubled you all. Lu Qing, what is the meaning of this?" Lu Qing was the consecrator of Fuxin Island. He waved his hand and said, "Nyosin, don't misunderstand. Daluo sect sent a message to the 4 sects, asking us to stop this fight. We just received the sect master's decree, and we don't have any other intentions." The demonic sects didn't say anything. They believed this. Daluo sect must have noticed that the situation was bad and sent a message back to the sect. They didn't stop it at first, probably thinking that they would gain an advantage. Who knew that they would be at a disadvantage? Daluo sect couldn't send people over, so they sent a message to the 4 sects, asking them to send a decree to the people in Wanghai town. "Why didn't you stop it earlier? Why now?" Yu Qianshou sneered. He was a smart person and could see through the trick at a glance. "We don't know about that. After receiving the decree from the sect, we immediately came here," Lu Qing said. Nyosin sized up Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan. Suddenly he looked at Yu Qianshou with a strange expression. He thought to himself, "Those 2 are clearly showing signs of exhaustion. I'm afraid it will be difficult for them to make a move. This brat is famous for not being at a disadvantage. Why would he give up such a great opportunity? Strange. He didn't think about it. With Yu Qianshou's current cultivation, he couldn't see through the late-stage tribulation passing experts. Otherwise he wouldn't be so lucky. He would definitely pounce on them and slaughter them." After the group of cultivators at the end of the tribulation transcendence stage looked at Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan, they seemed to be deep in thought. They all stared at Yu Qianshou in silence. No one had revealed the truth. It all depended on Yu Qianshou's decision. Yu Qianshou was in the middle of a group of people at the end of the tribulation transcendence stage. When he saw everyone looking at him with a strange expression, Yu Qianshou immediately felt the pressure on him increase. He looked at Purple Dress and realized that it would be difficult for him to succeed in a short period of time. It was the same for the special forces below. "Since none of you are speaking, then let's just waste time." Yu Qianshou was on high alert. In any case, Purple Dress and the special battle team below them had the upper hand. If he could buy more time, he might be able to kill a few of them. It would be even better if he could kill one at the end of the tribulation stage. He wanted to waste time, but the righteous sects did not want to waste time with him. Everyone had come under the sect leader's decree. Afterwards they would have to report the completion of the task. Lu Qing of Supporting Immortal Island said, "Yu Qianshou, tell your people to stop. Now is the time to unite against the outsiders. Why must you kill them all? Isn't it better to save energy to deal with the outsiders?" With so many powerful people gathered, Yu Qianshou knew that he could not delay any longer. He curled his lips unwillingly and said, "Tell the people from Daluo sect to stop first. Once they stop, my people will naturally stop as well." Lu Qing looked down and frowned. He said, "The people from Daluo sect are defending and your people are attacking. How can you tell the people from Daluo sect to stop first? If they stop, isn't it the same as seeking death?" Yu Qianshou was stunned. He looked down and realized that it was indeed the case. If the people from Daluo sect stopped, the special battle team would instantly slaughter them all. He thought that it was a pity, but there was nothing he could do about it. There was a group of powerful people here. Then he shouted, "Purple Dress, come back, stop fighting." When Purple Dress heard this, she immediately recalled her purple bamboo and teleported to Yu Qianshou's side. She said with a surprised expression, "Why are you stopping? Give me another half an hour and I'll definitely kill those 2. She didn't look like she was satisfied with the fight. The various sects were speechless. They did not expect this woman to be so belligerent. Yu Qianshou said, "Go back down." Z-Dress had no choice but to follow him back to the ground. "Stop attacking and prepare for battle." With Yu Qianshou's order, even if the special battle team had doubts, they would not ask them out loud like Z-Dress. They immediately teleported back, but they were still on guard. The people from Daluo sect were also huddled together, not daring to relax. Clearly they were afraid of being beaten up. The people from the various sects in the final phase of tribulation transcendence also teleported down.
They stood between the two sides to prevent them from accidentally fighting again. Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao carried Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai back to Daluo sect's side. Luo Kuan said in a low voice, "Stop fighting." Only then did the people from Daluo sect believe that it was over. They all relaxed as if they had just survived a disaster. Especially Zhu Xianxian, who was hiding in the middle of a few dozen people. He was still in shock. Of all the people in the early phase of tribulation transcendence, he was the only one who survived. Fortunately, a group of people had been protecting him for Zhu Zhao's sake. The Allure Beauty leisurely walked over. Suddenly, she noticed that Yu Qianqiu was gritting his teeth. She could not help but ask, "What's wrong?" "I was tricked." Yu Qianqiu stared at the pale-faced Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai, who were being supported by two disciples. Only now did he realize that those two fellows had already reached such a stage. Just now they were barely holding on, but he had wasted such a good opportunity. Now that he understood, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. This was too vexing. The people in the final phase of tribulation transcendence in the middle naturally understood what he meant, but they all pretended as if nothing had happened. In their hearts, they were also sighing at how lucky Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai were. To be able to survive this guy's attack was truly a miracle. "The Luo sect, please return first." Lu Qin cupped his hands at Luo Kuan. Luo Kuan's face was ashen as he returned the greeting. Then he ordered his disciples to collect the corpses of the dead disciples. Not long after, there were only 200 corpses of the special forces left on the plaza. When the people in the final phase of tribulation transcendence saw Yu Qianqiu staring at the corpses on the ground with twitching expressions, they exchanged glances and silently dispersed. There was nothing left for them to do here. The 400 or so special forces who were still alive remained silent. Ziyi's face was also filled with solemnity. The Allure Beauty's gaze shifted to Yu Qianqiu. Seeing that his face was flushed red, and the veins on his neck could already be seen bulging, it was clear that he was extremely angry. "Collect the corpses of our brothers onto the fourth flying artifact," Yu Qianqiu said word by word. The special forces dispersed. They silently picked up their comrades and quietly sent them onto the fourth flying artifact. The onlookers from the various sects looked at these masked rogue cultivators with admiration. Although there were only about 400 people left, almost all of them had died at the hands of the two cultivators in the final phase of tribulation transcendence. The Daluo sect had more than 1,000 people, and many of them were in the tribulation transcendence stage. However, almost all of them had been killed by these people, leaving only a few dozen alive. Yu Qianqiu silently walked toward the fourth flying artifact. Ziyi and the Allure Beauty followed behind him. However, when they were about to reach the cabin door, a group of masked rogue cultivators suddenly blocked their way, separating the two women from Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu didn't even turn his head as if he didn't know anything. He walked in without even looking back. Only the two captains followed him in, and then the cabin door immediately closed. "Why did you stop us?" The Allure Beauty looked at the group of masked people in front of her and asked, "The Mister wants to send the dead brothers home. Please don't disturb him," the person in front said indifferently. The Allure Beauty and Ziyi looked at each other, their faces filled with confusion. Inside the cabin, Yu Qianqiu looked at the over 200 corpses on the cabin's board without any expression on his face. He extended his palm and said indifferently, "Go back. Go back to Utopia and rest in peace. I will use the entire Daluo sect as a sacrifice for you." He didn't say anything else. He released his divine senses, and the over 200 corpses instantly disappeared. In Utopia's military camp, after Guan Yu received the notice, he had already gathered everyone. Close to 10,000 people were waiting quietly. When over 200 corpses appeared, Guan Yu waved his hand and a group of people came out. They silently removed the masked robes with the words "Rogue Cultivator" embroidered on them and helped them change into Utopia's attire. Everyone bowed silently. After bowing, Guan Yu shouted, "Hong Qi, Zhang Peng and Gu Qingyun, step forward." After the three of them came to the other side, he continued, "These 200 Special Forces members were sacrificed in an intense battle outside. The leader has specially requested for the three of you to personally give them a proper burial. Can you do it?" "Yes," the three of them said in unison. Guan Yu waved his hand. "Carry it out immediately." Yu Qianqiu and the two team leaders were silent for a long time before they opened the cabin door and walked out. When they saw everyone again, they had already regained their composure. After putting away the two flying artifacts, they ordered all the team members to return to the remaining four. "I'm going back,"
the Allure Beauty suddenly said to the two of them with a smile. Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi looked at each other and asked in surprise, "Go back where? I can't help you much even if I stay by your side." "Of course I have to go back," the Allure Beauty said and nodded to the two of them. Then she turned around and left. Her smile was slightly bitter. She originally thought that she would be of great help if she stayed by Yu Qianqiu's side. However, during the battle just now, she realized that Ziyi could not only fight against two cultivators in the late stage of the crossing calamity stage, but even Yu Qianqiu could fight against two cultivators in the late stage of the crossing calamity stage alone. She immediately realized to her dismay that she was so useless. The members of the pink sect who were not far away quickly came to her. When they were a few meters away from her, they all bowed and said, "Greetings, sect leader." The Allure Beauty raised her hand to indicate that there was no need to be so polite. Then she turned around and smiled at the two of them. Then she left under the welcome of the pink sect members. Ziyi was surprised and said, "Isn't she the palace master of the illusion palace that was wiped out? How did she become the sect leader?" "It's called the west side is bright when the east side is dark. You don't understand," Yu Qianqiu replied casually. He didn't think that the Enchantress of 100 Charm would announce his identity so openly. Ziyi's pretty face immediately turned cold when she heard him say that she didn't understand. The onlookers were shocked. They did not expect the Allure Beauty to be the sect leader of the pink sect, which was ranked 10th in the demonic path. Then many people from the various sects left quickly. Obviously, they were in a hurry to report this important news to their sections. Soon, a disciple of the supporting Immortals Island flew over on his sword. He bowed to Yu Qianqiu and said, "Sir, the Cultivation Alliance has something to discuss. Please go there quickly." From the way he looked at Yu Qianqiu, it could be seen that he had already regarded Yu Qianqiu as an extraordinary figure. After all, Yu Qianqiu was an expert who could defeat two experts at the end of the crossing calamity stage by himself. And he was from the supporting Immortals Island. "Do you know what it is?" Yu Qianqiu asked. The disciple replied honestly, "It seems to be a discussion about attacking Wuxia Island. I don't know the specifics." Yu Qianqiu frowned and waved his hand. "Lead the way." A flying sword flew out of his sleeve and carried him. The disciple hurriedly led the two of them into the town on his flying sword. From the sky, the three of them entered the largest house in Wanghai town. It was probably the house of a rich family. The back garden was very spacious and there were already many people there. As soon as Yu Qianqiu arrived, everyone's eyes focused on him. The previous battle had already qualified him to be on equal footing with everyone present. Yu Qianqiu's eyes met with Luo Kuan's from the Daluo sect. The two of them looked at each other and looked away. However, Yu Qianqiu stared at Zhu Xianxian for a while, which made the latter feel a little creeped out. A familiar body fragrance assailed his nose. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and was shocked to find Allure Beauty beside him. She was smiling at him without saying a word. He immediately remembered that she was now the leader of the pink sect. Naturally, she was qualified to be here. Ziyi saw Allure Beauty and approached her happily. After the various sects whispered to each other, they all nodded at Quan Deming from the supporting Immortals Island. Quan Deming stood up and cupped his hands. "Everyone, we were prepared to attack Wuxia Island and wipe them out in one fell swoop. Now, reinforcements from Wuxia Island are still rushing over. If we wait any longer, it will be even more disadvantageous for us. After asking for the opinions of the various sects, we felt that it was urgent. Now, we have gathered everyone here to ask if there are any objections. There is nothing wrong with going according to the previous arrangements, but..." When Zhongping from the Blood Demon Palace walked out and said, "There is an accident now. Almost all the disciples from the Daluo sect were killed. It is indeed inappropriate to go according to the previous arrangements." Zhu Xianxian immediately replied, "You don't have to worry about that. Our sect's disciples are already on the way. They will arrive before sunrise tomorrow." Some of the smaller sects were secretly shocked. The large sects were indeed large sections. They lost so many people and they made up for it just like that. That is naturally good. However, there is something that I need Elder Zhu to explain, Wen Zhongping said with a smile. "What do I need to explain to you?" Zhu Xianxian said disdainfully. One was the second largest sect of the righteous path, and the other was the second largest sect of the demonic path. It was just like the supporting Immortals Island and the 10,000 demons. When they met their corresponding opponents, they would fight each other to determine who was better. It had almost become a habit. When Zhongping walked up to him and said with a smile, Previously, many sects listened to Elder Zhu's opinion and gathered more than 60 million superior-grade spirit stones. Now that we don't have the people and we can't get the money back, Elder Zhu has to give us an explanation. 60 million superior-grade spirit stones is not a small number. Wen Zhongping, why are you bringing this up now? No one is forcing your blood demon palace to hand over the money. Why are you asking me for an explanation? What nonsense. As Zhu Xianxian argued, he subconsciously glanced at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu naturally understood what was going on with the 60 million, but he obediently stood to the side and turned a deaf ear to Zhu Xianxian's words. The eyes of the sects that had paid up immediately lit up. At this point, which sect would dare ask Yu Qianqiu for money or manpower? Everyone was already prepared for misfortune. However, if they took advantage of the Deluo sect's weakness and used Yu Qianqiu's presence to force the Deluo sect to cough up the money, wouldn't that be even better? That's right. Elder Zhu, you were the one who suggested it and we raised the money according to your suggestion. Now, you should at least say something about giving us people or returning our money. You can't let us lose both our people and our money. Yuan Jiukui of the Hexapath Demon Sect stepped forward. Walking up to Wen Zhongping's side, the two exchanged a smile. Wen Zhongping cupped his hands and said, "Old brother Yuan's words are reasonable. You should at least give us an explanation." That's right. You should at least give us an explanation. At least 5 or 6 sects joined in on the commotion, most of them from the demonic path. Even if the righteous path wanted to take back the money, they had no choice but to swallow their anger. After all, they were all from the righteous path, and as long as the demonic path caused a ruckus, they would definitely get their money back. Luo Kuan was resting with his eyes closed, but from the twitching of his cheeks, it was clear that he wasn't calm at all. Zhu Xianxian pointed at the two of them and said angrily, "At that time were the two of you fighting for more money and trying to get more people? Now you're asking me for an explanation? Go find whoever took the money. Go find whoever has the hostage. Go find whoever has him." What a glib tongue. You're able to push the blame away so quickly. Wen Zhongping sneered, "Your Deluo sect killed more than 200 people. Who are we going to ask for the people? Are we going to ask the legendary emperor of the Netherworld? We don't have the ability to find him. Why don't you go ask him for us?" Everyone deliberately avoided Yu Qianqiu because they wanted to drag the Deluo sect into this. Zhu Xianxian suddenly shouted, "The people are Yu Qianqiu's men and the money is also Yu Qianqiu's. Go find him if you have the ability." Everyone was silent. They didn't expect him to be so unafraid of pressure and drag Yu Qianqiu into this at this time. Everyone stared at Yu Qianqiu. As expected, Yu Qianqiu's eyelids slowly opened, and he stared at Zhu Xianxian. "Surnamed Zhu, what money did I take from you? Who do I have in my hands? Are you purposely picking a fight with me again? Do you really think that I won't dare to kill you because there are so many people here?" Zhu Xianxian looked at Luo Kuan who was staring at him and he felt sad. He knew that after this matter he probably wouldn't be able to be the external manager of the Deluo sect anymore. He decided to say, "Yu Qianqiu, to tell you the truth, the Cultivation Alliance's decree to summon 600 itinerant cultivators and pay more than 60 million upper-grade spirit stones was actually pooled together by the sections. The purpose was to divide the 600 tribulation stage cultivators." The sects were speechless. Wen Zhongping and Yuan Jiukui's expressions twitched. They knew that things were not going well. Yu Qianqiu chuckled, looked around at everyone and said, "So there is such a thing. This is the first time I've heard of it. I don't know which sects paid to divide up my people. Why don't you all come out? I want to see who is scheming against me behind my back." He said it was the first time he had heard of it, but who would believe him? The sects that were making a ruckus just now all turned their heads to the side, as if they had never heard of it before. The people from Supporting Immortal Island looked at this disciple from Supporting Immortal Island, and they found it hard to describe. Chapter 425. One person intimidated the Cultivation Alliance. It wasn't that the sects were afraid of him, but at least no one dared to openly oppose him. Strength determined status, this was something that everyone was well aware of. If Yu Qianqiu's side had lost the previous battle, the sects would have forced him to cough up 60 million spirit stones, and that would have been a light punishment. There were probably a lot of people who wanted to get rid of him. Yu Qianqiu, it's not like anyone is scheming against you. Everyone is willing to fork out money because they want some benefits. Otherwise, the sects wouldn't throw away the spirit stones they've worked so hard to save. But you've also suffered heavy losses. We're all members of the Cultivation Alliance, so it's not right to ask for anything from you.
Forget it, the Blood Demon Palace won't bring this up again. When Zhongping waved his hand generously and returned to the Blood Demon Palace's side as if nothing had happened. Hearing this, Zhu Xianxian was so angry that he nearly crushed his own teeth. Did the Daluo sect not suffer heavy losses? Did the Daluo sect not belong to the Alliance of Cultivators? Did the Daluo sect have to ask for something from the Alliance of Cultivators? He was angry, but he also understood that in the cultivation world, there were always superfluous things. Sending help in a snowy weather was nonsense. As long as there were benefits to be gained, there would be endless cases of people taking advantage of the situation. If it were someone else, the Daluo sect would have done the same. In the cultivation world, not protecting one's own interest was the same as cutting off one's own path to survival. The Blood Demon Palace has already set an example. Can the Hexapath Demon sect still be a villain? Yuan Jiukui laughed and walked back, waving his hand as he walked. This matter is over. The other sects didn't say anything either. It was as if doing something like this was normal. No one would feel embarrassed. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't for personal benefits. They were fighting for the entire sect. What was there to be embarrassed about? Luo Kuan's face was ashen. Everyone in the Daluo sect was silent, having experienced the fickleness of the world. As the second largest sect of the righteous path, once they lost their power they were still worthless. None of them were good. Yu Qianzhou sneered. Quan Deming of the supporting Immortal Island coughed and looked around at the crowd. Since there are no other opinions, when the reinforcements from the Daluo sect arrive tomorrow, the 263 sects of the Cultivation Alliance will coordinate according to the original plan and strive to annihilate the Wuxia Island in one fell swoop, eliminating a major threat to the Chinese cultivation world. While everyone was nodding in agreement, someone suddenly said, Elder Quan, if the foreign cultivators of the Limitless Island are defeated, it's more likely that they will flee to the south. My sword sect leads the 36 sects and we defend the south. Although there are many people in the 36 sects, there aren't many people with profound cultivation bases. In order to prevent any accidents, how about this? Wasn't Yu Qianzhou and the other rogue cultivators not included in the original plan? Why don't you coordinate with us to guard the south as well? This way I'm sure it'll be much safer. When everyone heard this, they looked over and saw Duan Tianbua of the sword sect making his plans. Only then did everyone remember that the combat strength of Yu Qianzhou's subordinates was obvious to all. They were extremely powerful. As long as the other side didn't send a late-stage tribulation passing expert, the remaining 400 people should have no problem dealing with 1,000 or 2,000 people. His words woke everyone up from their dreams, and the various sects immediately became active. The sword sect, which was ranked fourth among the righteous sects, had jumped out. How could the Hexapath demonic sect, which was ranked fourth among the demonic sects, let it play a one-man show? Putting the demonic sect's face aside, they couldn't let go of such a great benefit. Yuan Jiukui chuckled and said, Duan Tianbua, you're wrong. In my opinion, the Wuxia Island is just a motley crew. Once they lose, it's unlikely that they will flee to the south. Think about it. The supporting Immortal Island is in the south with tens of thousands of disciples and experts. If they flee to the south, they will definitely be worried about being attacked by the supporting Immortal Island. Therefore it's unlikely that they will flee to the south. Yuan Jiukui, according to what you said, do you think they will give up what's close at hand and go to the east? Duan Tianbua sneered with disdain. That's right. Once they lose they will most likely take a detour to the east. Yuan Jiukui gestured to the crowd and said, if we go south, even if we pass through the supporting Immortal Island, we will reach the vast Demon Ghost Domain. Do you think that the motley crew of Everlasting Island can cross the Demon Ghost Domain and go back? That should be impossible. Speaking of the Demon Domain, Duan Tianbua was stunned. Even he didn't believe that anyone could cross the Demon Domain. Since he couldn't find any reason to refute, he could only look at Yuan Jiukui with a sullen face and continue, fleeing to the west is the hinterland of the Chinese cultivation world. Not to mention the front line of defense. If you go deeper you'll find sentries everywhere. Once you're defeated, the sects entrenched there won't let you off easily. There's no need to mention the north. That's the closest route for them to escape. That's why we gathered our strongest forces to attack from the north. That's why the north isn't suitable for them to escape. After saying that, Yuan Jiukui hugged his stomach and looked at everyone. He laughed and said, in that case we don't have to worry about the south, west and north. The place that we need to focus on is the east. That's why I feel that Yu Qianzhou and the other wandering cultivators should coordinate with us to defend the east. That way we won't be able to block them all, but we can at least reduce the number of fish that slip through the net. The debate was well-founded and the demonic sects cheered, while the righteous sects looked inferior in comparison. The six-path demonic sect's late-stage tribulation transcendence revered elders slightly nodded and looked at Yuan Jiukui with praise. Yuan Jiukui slightly bowed to the elders and retreated. He seemed to be quite proud of himself. The Daoyuo sect's Luo Kun glanced coldly at Zhu Xianxian. He had also heard that Yuan Jiukui and Yu Qianqiu had almost fought in the 100-Flower Valley. However, Yuan Jiukui had expressed goodwill toward Yu Qianqiu several times, and after that he and Yu Qianqiu had gotten along peacefully. How could he be like this fellow who couldn't distinguish the severity of the situation? When Luo Kun compared the two sides, he couldn't help but feel sick in his heart. They were both external managers of their sects, but the disparity between them wasn't small. Maida Luo sect simply picked a pig to be the manager. The Allure Beauty glanced at Yu Qianqiu, only to see him crossing his arms in front of his chest. Although this matter involved him, he didn't say a word. Half of his eyebrows were raised, and it seemed like the cold smile on his face never stopped. Luo Kun couldn't help but shake his head. These people's words were better than singing. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu was that good of a manager? If that was the case, then he wouldn't be Yu Qianqiu. Quan Deming looked at the various sects inquiringly. Seeing that no one said anything, he nodded and said, "Since that's the case, all wandering cultivators will return to the east." Yuan Jiukui immediately beamed with joy as he looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile that said, "We're on the same side now." Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu would greet him with a face full of ridicule? Yuan Jiukui couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. This fellow was too daring. Who did he learn this from? Yuan Jiukui was really afraid that Yu Qianqiu would do something bad at the critical moment. "Yu Qianqiu, do you have any objections?" Yuan Jiukui had no choice but to ask in advance so that no one would stab him in the back. When the various sects heard this, they looked at Yu Qianqiu and found that this fellow's indifferent attitude was really thought-provoking. The sword sect's Duan Tianbo was instantly amused. Or rather, he was gloating. Who could make this fellow's decision? As expected, Yu Qianqiu looked Yuan Jiukui up and down and said in a strange tone, "You're asking me what opinions I have? You all turned a blind eye to me and made the decision first. Now you're asking me what opinions I have? It's the first time I've seen such an unreasonable person in the cultivation world." Putting aside Yuan Jiukui's embarrassment, the one who was the most embarrassed was Fuxin Island's Quan Deming. It seemed like he was the one who made the final decision. Quan Deming opened his mouth and said with a bitter smile, "I've been negligent. Yu Qianqiu, you don't have to be calculative. If you have anything to say, you might as well say it. I have to give face to Elder Quan, and I've always been an honest person. I won't beat around the bush. Since that's the case, I'll speak the truth. If there's anything unpleasant in my words, please don't take it to heart." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the various sects and slowly said, "I've already been schemed against before I even arrived. Whether you all admit it or not, it's a fact that everyone is well aware of. I originally came here with a belly full of hot-bloodedness. I wanted to do my utmost for the Chinese cultivation world, even if I had to die 1,000 deaths. But there are deaths that are heavier than a mountain, and there are deaths that are lighter than a goose feather. Dying in battle for the Chinese cultivation world is heavier than a mountain, and dying from being schemed against is lighter than a goose feather. Everyone, you've really disappointed me. Since that's the case, instead of leaving me with lingering fear, it's better to let me continue to do my utmost until my death. I think we wandering cultivators shouldn't be included in this matter." The various sects looked at each other in dismay. It turned out that he just wanted to go it alone. Duan Qianbo looked at Yuan Jiukui, who had just spent a lot of time talking but was now in a daze. He couldn't help but smile. "Fight my ass. So what if they won?" Quan Deming frowned and said, "Yu Qianqiu, we're all part of the Cultivation Alliance. Before the war, all sects should obey the unified arrangement. It's not good that you guys aren't included. It's true that all sects should obey the arrangement. But the key is that we're wandering cultivators. We don't belong to any sects, so we naturally don't need to follow the rules of the sections." Yu Qianqiu said with some emotion, "More than 600 people. We've only just arrived. More than 200 people died in the blink of an eye. If we didn't have some ability to protect ourselves, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to stand and talk right now. Everyone, it's not that we don't want to follow the rules. But the lesson we just learned with the lives of 200 people is unforgettable. 200 dead people were a bunch of reasons, but what about 1,000 dead people?" Everyone cursed inwardly,
their eyes inadvertently glancing at the Deluo sect, who didn't look happy. You may be wandering cultivators, but since you've already joined the Cultivation Alliance, you should at least do your part. The Cultivation Alliance's budget of spiritual stones. Before Quan Deming could finish, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted, Elder Quan, don't worry. We wandering cultivators may be weak, but we're the most trustworthy. We'll never take money and not work. Even if we're not in the scope of the overall arrangement, we're still loyal. If you don't believe me, just wait and see. What exactly do you mean? Just say it. Quan Deming didn't want to spar with him anymore. No matter how much he beat around the bush, he wouldn't get anything practical. It's very simple. Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and said, we wandering cultivators fight independently and look for opportunities on our own. We don't need to be included in the Cultivation Alliance's overall arrangement for the time being. We'll talk about the overall arrangement after our wounded hearts have calmed down a little. What do you think? All the sects looked at each other, but no one expressed their opinion. They were all wondering how long it would take for their wounded hearts to calm down, especially when it came to looking for opportunities. That was quite unreliable. What if they couldn't find an opportunity? Also, everyone had to pay for the expenses of more than 400 wandering cultivators. The thought of someone taking money without doing any work made no one happy. Although it wasn't a lot, it was still unfair. Quan Deming pondered for a while, then looked at everyone and said, Fuxian Island isn't in a position to make decisions for everyone. I wonder if anyone has any different opinions? At that moment, 100 Charm Demon Lady stood up and said with a smile, I've spent some time with the wandering cultivators, and I'm quite confident in their ability to look for opportunities to fight. Perhaps it's more suitable than our overall arrangement. On behalf of the Pink Sect, I agree that the wandering cultivators fight independently. Of course you agree. Perhaps you've already slept on the same bed with Yu Qianqiu. You're a family. All the sects looked at 100 Charm Demon Lady ambiguously. At that moment, the four major families naturally wouldn't pass on the responsibility. Bai Shan said in a deep voice, the four major families agree. 10,000 demons had their own plans for Yu Qianqiu, so they also agreed. Hexapath Demon Sect's Yuan Jiukue looked around and laughed. It seems like my previous thoughts were a little shallow. Since 10,000 demons agree, then Hexapath Demon Sect will also support it. Fuxian Island will listen to everyone's opinions. If anyone has any different opinions, feel free to voice them. Don't let it affect tomorrow's battle, said Quan Deming. Most of the sects remained silent, clearly unwilling to do so. However, no one was willing to offend Yu Qianqiu in front of them. This fellow's way of doing things was a little vengeful, and his strength was displayed in front of everyone. There was nothing that couldn't be resolved, so it was best not to provoke him. Everyone expressed their protest with silence. No objection means you agree. Thank you for your understanding and support. Yu Qianqiu nodded and turned to Quan Deming with cupped fists. Elder Quan, everyone's opinion is clear. Please make the final announcement. This will give us the right to fight. Everyone's expression twitched. They had never seen someone as shameless as him. Quan Deming looked around in shock and asked in a loud voice, Are there really no objections from the sects? He looked around and no one said anything. He could only smile bitterly and say, Since no one objects, then let's do it. He felt embarrassed to say anything, so he could only reply perfunctorily. Yu Qianqiu didn't think much of it. After all, this was what he wanted. He turned around and cupped his fists to thank everyone. However, most of them turned around and left. Who would want this kind of thanks? Chapter 426. The various sects had either left or dispersed. Only a few sects that were friendly with him were still there. Bai Shan came over and saluted. We knew that Mr. would come with a group of people, so we have already prepared a place for Mr. to stay. Before he could finish, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and smiled. I appreciate your kindness, but there is no need to go through so much trouble. The flying instrument is more than enough for us to stay. The Allure Enchantress smiled and thought of the big comfortable bed on the flying instrument. At night, she could open the skylight to look at the night view, and after closing it, it was even more reliable than an iron wall. Naturally, it was safer than ordinary houses. There was one thing that the Allure Beauty still couldn't understand. She still couldn't see what the flying magic tool was made of, and she couldn't destroy it with her cultivation. She also suspected that it was the nether iron, but when she thought of the huge amount of materials needed to build the flying instrument, she denied this guess. She could not figure it out, but someone else could. Not long after Yu Qianshou and Ziyi returned to the flying instrument, a subordinate came to report that the corpse sect's principal elder and 3 consecrators had come to visit. Yu Qianshou was startled. He had never interacted with the people of the corpse sect, so why were they here? Although he could not figure it out, he still went out to greet them personally. As soon as he came out of the cabin, he saw the 4 people staring at the flying instrument with their mouths slightly open, as if they could not come back to their senses. Yu Qianshou suddenly understood. He had heard from Wuxia that the corpse's god sect had a treasure that was made of dark iron. Of course, the upper echelons of the corpse's god sect were familiar with dark iron. For seniors, are you here to see me, Yu Qianshou? Yu Qianshou had an idea, but he still asked despite knowing the answer. The 4 people came back to their senses and one of them came out to return the greeting. I am Tai Junshan, the external principal of the corpse sect, and these 3 are our consecrators. He then introduced the 3 people to Yu Qianshou one by one. They were Jiang Huan, Feng Rudian, and Ji Feiming. Greetings, seniors. Yu Qianshou cupped his fists, turned around and said with a smile, I don't even have a place to receive guests here. If the 4 seniors don't mind, why don't you take a seat in the flying mystic instrument? The 4 of them couldn't wait to go in and take a look. They nodded happily and followed him in. The interior had already been separated by 2 raised panels, and the loose cultivators and the important parts were all blocked. 5 raised chairs were already waiting for the guests. Yu Qianshou didn't want anyone to see what was going on inside. As the 5 of them sat down, Yu Qianshou smiled and did not say a word as he watched the 4 of them fumble with the armrests of the seats. He let them slowly touch it to their heart's content and did not disturb them. After a long time, the 4 of them recovered from the shock. After looking at each other, Tai Junshan shook his head and said with a bitter smile, Yu Qianshou, since you have these flying mystic instruments, you must know what they are made of. Yu Qianshou leaned against the armrest, crossed his legs and supported his chin with his hand. He smiled faintly and said, Of course I know. Senior Tai, if you have anything to say, just say it. I'm used to being honest and not used to beating around the bush. These words made the faces of the 4 of them twitch. Tai Junshan paused and said, Then I'll say it directly. Yu Qianshou, if I'm not wrong, these flying mystic instruments of yours are all made of nether iron, right? That's right. Yu Qianshou nodded slightly and signaled him to continue. It said that nether iron can only be found in the legendary nether cave. You can only find a small amount in the nether cave above the 8th level, but it's impossible to find so much. I don't know where you found so much. Can you tell the corpse sect? Tai Junshan asked with a trace of a pleading tone. Why should I tell you for no reason? Yu Qianshou slightly frowned. The 3 consecrators of the corpse sect looked at each other. Jiang Huan said, Yu Qianshou, we won't let you say it for no reason. We will reward you heavily after this. The 4 of them nodded together. Reward me heavily? Yu Qianshou's eyes slightly brightened. He sat up straight and said bluntly, What kind of reward? Jiang Huan pondered and remembered that this guy had caused a lot of trouble for spirit stones, so he asked, How about spirit stones? As long as you tell us where you got them, we will reward you heavily with spirit stones. Spirit stones? How much would be appropriate? Yu Qianshou thought for a while. In the eyes of these people, he seemed to be a little unmoved, which made them feel that it was not the same as what they had heard. Jiang Huan suddenly took out a storage pouch and said, If you can tell us the truth, I have 10 million top-rank spirit stones here. I can pay you in advance. If it turns out that what you said is true, I can give you another 10 million. I will definitely keep my promise. The other 2 consecrators didn't think much of it, but Tai Junshan frowned and smiled bitterly in his heart. What a generous offer. Giving away 10 million right off the bat and even promised to follow up. Aren't you a little too impatient? Isn't this letting others know that we are thirsty for knowledge? Of course he wouldn't say it out loud. However, Tai Junshan felt a little headache. These consecrators hadn't been outside for a long time, so their experience in dealing with external affairs was not as good as his. When he first arrived, he wanted to come alone because bringing 3 consecrators would be too eye-catching. However, the 3 old guys were very anxious and wanted to come with him. As an external manager, how could he refuse? 10 million? Yu Qianshou was overjoyed. He thought, even if I tell you guys you can't go, it would be a waste not to earn this money. However, when he looked at the storage pouch, his expression didn't change, but his pupils shrank slightly. Subconsciously, he quickly swept his gaze across the faces of these people, and his mind quickly began to calculate. Tai Junshan had already noticed Yu Qianshou's abnormal reaction. His heart skipped a beat and thought, not good.
I'm afraid I'm going to be ripped off. However, to his surprise, Yu Qianqiu gently pushed the storage pouch in front of him back and shook his head. A gentleman loves money, but he gets it in the right way. Yu Qianqiu may not have a good reputation, but I still have a bottom line. I can't just casually say some words to earn your spirit stones. This goes against the way Yu Qianqiu conduct. When he said this, everyone was shocked. 10 million was indeed a lot, but he actually rejected money that was given to him. This was too different from the rumored Yu Qianqiu. Jiang Huan was shocked. Could it be that you're too idle? Did Senior Jiang really think what I said was a joke? Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. He lamented, looks like everyone's misunderstanding of me is not just a little bit deep. A misunderstanding is a misunderstanding. As long as you have a clear conscience, I only earn the money that I should earn. Even if you give me 10 billion spirit stones, I won't take a single one. He rejected the spirit stones that were already in his hands. Coupled with these words, everyone immediately felt a sense of respect for him. Only Tai Junshan asked doubtfully, could it be that you have something that you can't say? Or that you can't easily tell us the place where you can collect nether iron? Those who know what I know are my worries. Those who don't know me are asking for something. Looks like Elder Tai still has some doubts about me. Forget it, I don't need to defend myself anymore. Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a sorrowful expression. He looked around at everyone and said, I can tell you the place where you can collect nether iron, but don't mention the spirit stones again. Otherwise it would be an insult to me, Yu Qianqiu. There was such a good thing? As everyone looked at each other, Yu Qianqiu said seriously, since Elder Tai knows about the nether cave and mentioned the 8 nether cave, how could you not know about the 9 nether cave? The 9 nether cave? Everyone was speechless. Tai Junshan hurriedly asked, it's not that I haven't heard of the 9 nether cave, but even if there is such a place, the legends say that it is extremely powerful. I'm afraid that no one can enter, so I didn't mention it. Could it be that the nether iron used to make these flying magic tools comes from the 9 nether cave? That's right, it is the 9 nether cave. Yu Qianqiu nodded. Everyone looked at each other speechlessly. Tai Junshan said in a low voice, you're not joking, right? Rumor has it that the 9 nether cave is the passage to the ghost world. It is said that even the legendary soul formation cultivators can't enter it. How could anyone go in and collect nether iron? Humans can't go in, but it doesn't mean that other things can't. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly. Everyone was confused. Jiang Huan pondered for a while and asked, the 9 nether cave is the passage to the ghost world. You mean, could it be a ghost cultivator? Senior Jiang is so knowledgeable. Yu Qianqiu first flattered, then nodded and said, that's right, a ghost cultivator. Moreover, a ghost cultivator with an extremely high level of cultivation. Normal ghost cultivators can't enter it. Tai Junshan pointed at the flying magic tool and said, from what you said, could it be that the nether iron used to make these flying magic tools were all collected by ghost cultivators from the 9 nether cave? This ghost cultivator with such a high level of cultivation could do this for you? He clearly didn't quite believe it. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and had his own explanation. He tilted his body again and stared at Tai Junshan with his hands supporting his chin. I remember that the first time I met Elder Tai, it should be during the trial in the demonic ghost region. It seems that ever since that time, the 6 sects never held the trial in the demonic ghost region again. That's right, we did meet once, but you were still a little disciple of Fuxian Island at that time. Who knew that now? Tai Junshan shook his head emotionally. The little disciple from back then had achieved something that even he couldn't hope to achieve. His improvement was godly. Yu Qianqiu nodded and smiled. I still remember that many disciples of each sect were captured by a ghost king with extremely powerful cultivation. I racked my brains and spent a lot of effort to finally rescue the disciples of each sect. However, after all these years, how many people still remember my kindness to Yu Qianqiu? On the contrary, I heard many people call me a scum and a madman. Human feelings are like flowing water. There are so many fickle people. Let's not talk about them. The disciples of the corpse sect were also rescued back then, and Tai Junshan was one of them. Hearing this, he looked at the 3 consecrators awkwardly. Of course, Jiang Feng and Ji also knew about this. After hearing this, they thought about what Yu Qianqiu had done to them back then and thought about what they had done to Yu Qianqiu now. They all sighed and felt that it was indeed everyone who had wronged him first. Jiang Huan nodded silently. Yu Qianqiu, it's all in the past. You're in the cultivation world now, so you should understand what's going on. There's no need to take it to heart.
The three corpse sect consecrators looked at him with much gentler gazes, and they gradually let down their guard. Based on their intuition, such a sentimental person couldn't be that bad. Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and sneered. It's not to the extent of taking it to heart. It's just that those people who scolded me behind my back don't know how to touch their own consciences and ask themselves if they're ashamed or not. As Tai Junshan listened, he was suddenly startled. He thought to himself, where are we going in circles? Why are we talking about trivial matters? He then coughed and said, Yu Qianqiu, I wonder which ghost cultivator with an extremely high cultivation helped you gather the nether iron. Does our Wuxia cultivation world have such ghost cultivators? If there is, I wonder if you can introduce me to them. The third consecrator also came to a realization. The topic had gone too far and he almost forgot the purpose of this trip. More communication could reduce misunderstandings. Yu Qianqiu smiled knowingly and shook his head. Elder Tai, didn't I just tell you about that ghost cultivator with an extremely high cultivation? Why are you asking again? Did you just say it? Tai Junshan looked at the three consecrators who were also confused. He knew that they probably didn't get it either, so he lowered his head and pondered. He recalled every word that Yu Qianqiu said just now. After a long time, he suddenly raised his head and said in shock, the ghost cultivator you mentioned is... Are you referring to the ghost king who captured the disciples of the various sects during the trial in the demon ghost region? The three consecrators suddenly came to a realization and exclaimed in unison, Ghost General. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, during the trial in the demon ghost region, I was able to rescue the disciples of the various sects not because of my high cultivation, but because I got along well with the ghost general. Therefore he gave me some face and let the disciples go. Since I was chased out of Fuxin Island, many people wanted to kill me. There was no place for me in the cultivation world of China. I was forced to take the risk and go to the demon ghost region alone. The few of them looked at each other. No wonder the various sects couldn't find this guy. Even the Daluo sect couldn't find him when they sent people to look for him. It turned out that this guy had hidden in the demon ghost region. Who would go to that place to look for someone? It seemed that this guy had really gone all out to save his own life. Sigh. In terms of friendship, humans are inferior to ghosts. When I returned to the demon ghost region, the ghost general immediately gave me a place to stay. Therefore, I focused on cultivating in the demon ghost region. Finally, my cultivation improved a little. Only then did I dare to come out and take a look. Before I came out, he personally gathered a lot of nether iron for me and asked me to make something for him on the way out. However, I felt that there was no use for so much nether iron, so I asked the Jing family of the 4 major families to help me make a flying magic tool. The few of them nodded. So that was the case. Looking at the flying magic tool again, they couldn't help but feel a little heartache. It was really a waste of natural resources to use this thing to make a flying magic tool. Tai Junshan asked tentatively, what did the ghost general ask you to make for him? Nothing much. He asked me to gather some spirit stones for him to bring back. Yu Qianqiu replied disapprovingly. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.